Senator Reid, who I did think I saw in the chamber a moment ago, but he is just now not in his seat. I would have said to him, and I hope he can hear me, I'm sure he can, he's within the confines of Parliament, that he has some big shoes to fill. I, for one, certainly shall miss the frank and passionate contributions of his immediate predecessor in Senator Crystal Haynes. I also, Mr. President, would say to you that I will also miss how Senator Haynes always turned up well presented, attired in a way in keeping with this chamber. And I did notice, as I said, that when I was traveling, that I did watch the presentations. And I noticed that Senator Reid perhaps may want to have some discussion with Senator Nichols on the use of ties and bow ties as opposed to open neck shirts. But that's a personal preference. But Senator Nichols, I enjoy your bow ties often. I would also say one other thing, and I don't mean to open with these words, but I was a bit concerned, Senator Reid, as I'm glad to see you back in your seat. I was welcoming you. It was good to see you. Pleasant welcome. Welcome, welcome. I would say, in listening to your comments, and since you are new to the chamber here, and as others have heard me say this before, I was a bit concerned when you referred to the cricket training facility that would be available for Black Barbadians. Sir, this is words that I have in the past spoken about, to say that this chamber, we represent everyone. And I hope that this is not the direction that we go in. So, in making my comments about the budget or the appropriations bill, I would first like to deal with some leftover business from last year's budget, sir.
And what do you raise, Senator Reid?
Thank you, Mr. President. On a point of order, I want to clarify the statement that Senator Malou just made. I did in fact say facilities for Black Barbadians. He should listen to the tape, and he will realize I said specifically that cricket were one of the few platforms in which Black Barbadians, male and female, became millionaires and successful. I was very specific in my statement, and he could refer to it for any correction. He would also notice at the end of my statement, I went directly to a statement made by Senator John Rogers when he spoke of others. And I said that Barbados had no room for any others. Barbados is for all. So it's all of nation development. And it was, in fact, the most important point to me. So while I appreciate that he may have lost focus as a result of me not wearing a tie and seeing my chest, I was very precise in what I said, so I don't want to be misrepresented. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Please proceed, Senator Malou.
Thank you, President. So I just want to have some unfinished business from the last budget, as I said, which was to do with, and this is a very brief point, but I'm hoping that the Leader of Government Business or someone can help me with this. Left over from the last budget was the colloquium on real estate transactions. There have been 2 meetings so far on this matter, and this colloquium was to deal with the time and the cost and the inefficiency around real estate transactions. And I'm aware that there have been 2 meetings. I was invited to one. I wasn't invited to the second one. Perhaps my comments in the first one were not well received, so I didn't get invited back to the second one. But I would be curious as to what progress we're making on that, because it is certainly an item that was identified a year ago, and it's still, I've not seen much, if any, progress towards it. So, sir, let me just turn my attention then to the appropriations bill, if that's the right name, of the budget. however we are calling it here today. It's not my intention, sir, to delve into the details. You know that there's been lots of highly politicized discussion about it, and that is not my area. I am a non-politician on it. What I will have to say, though, is at the high level of policy. And what you can see from the budget, when you read the budget, is you can see where government's priorities are, where the policy is. And before I get there, I just want to say, as I have said before, that when I look at the budget in its totality, what I see is that there is a 1.15 billion, with a B, difference between the projected intake and the projected expenditure. Notice I did not call it revenue, sir, because you and I are both accountants. And revenue is something different than collecting taxes and fees. I would just call it intake. But the question, whenever I see something like this, sir, the question that goes unanswered, the question that's never addressed, never even in any way spoken about, and that's nothing to do with this budget, or this government's budget, or this political party's budget. This is in the way it seems to work in government circles, in difference to the business circles that I'm familiar with, is that we never address how are we going to pay back this 1.15 billion that we're adding to the debt of Barbados. That is not addressed in any way. And this government has done an excellent job in bringing down the ratio of debt to GDP. We've seen significant strides, and yesterday, my colleague, I think it might have been yesterday, excuse me if I don't get the days right, Senator Boyce, I think, went through in detail how those metrics have improved. I think at one point he said that if he was sitting on the other side, he would have been slamming the table many, many times, and I agree from that point of view. But I would like to understand, and it is the difference between me as a businessman and how government operates, in that there is the plan to repay a deficit is simply to borrow more money in the future. And that is not something that I am familiar with. But I would like to associate at this point myself with all of the comments of Senator Boyce. I really enjoyed his presentation, and rather than rehashing that all today, I shall just simply wish to associate myself with everything that he has said. I throw my weight behind it, especially the comments he's made about the areas of relief for the middle class, the areas of more resources needed in the civil court to function, and the need for economic diversification. And I too agree with him when he said that this government has stabilized the ship. So perhaps I would like to focus on a few areas. And before I do that, I guess what I've seen happen, or happening, in our large neighbor to our north, the United States of America, and the changes that have come under that new administration. At the end of the day, they're a democracy and they can elect whoever they would like to elect, and I have no say in that matter. And but the reality is that they're the big player in our neck of the woods. And it's interesting to see some of the things that they're doing. And I think that we could perhaps learn from something that they're doing. One of those areas, sir, which has an impact on us here in Barbados and is getting a lot of airplay globally, is the cancellation of the $23 billion from USAID's budget. Sir, I calculated $23 billion per year divided by their population of 300 million means that each and every American was contributing about 150 Barbados dollars to the USAID program. Many people have expressed anger and disappointment in the way in which North America has gone about, this current president of North America has gone about simply cancelling this these USAID programs. And it falls under this new department that they call DOGE, D-O-G-E, which seems to be run by a private sector individual. So while I disagree with the way in which they have gone about it, and the reason I'm going to tie this back into our budget, sir, is that we have a similar thing here. DOG means the Department of Government Efficiency. And for many, many years, many of the senators in this room will have heard of our public sector reform, which in some ways was similar. It was about getting better value for money, doing things more efficiently, digitizing, all these various things. I believe, actually, but if I go back to USAID for a second, sir, USAID, in my research, and I stand to be corrected, was actually formed in 1961 by President Kennedy. And President Kennedy at that time felt that it was, as a wealthy nation, it was their responsibility to help nations around the world to become market-led economies, to improve their health care, to help people out of poverty. They believed that in doing so, a stronger financial community globally, a stronger and more healthy world globally was good for everyone. And I think that that is true. But I must say, I do agree with them in their approach to say, but the money has to be well spent. And I think there is a great opportunity for us in Barbados to demonstrate that an investment with us is going to be money well spent. I also heard Senator King yesterday quote that old saying, and I will give you the source of it, Senator King. The Chinese philosopher, where is Senator King? Senator King, the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, if I can pronounce it correctly, he's the man who said, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. The reason I speak of that is that we must not think that USAID and grants and loans and all these various other things is money to be spent now, and that there's nothing more to be had from it. We must use it to improve our economy, expand our economy, to be able to learn from it. I believe that we as a country need to be able to stand on our own 2 feet, and I look forward to the day when we don't, in fact, have a deficit between what we intend to spend and what we intend to collect. I do not think that as a country going forward, we should be expecting charity. And I think that with the changes that we've seen in North America, there is a reset with this that we need to be very careful with. There is a huge reset. There's not just going to be that amount of charity, if you may want to call it, out there. And I am reminded, sir, quite often, and this will be the first time in my 3.5 years, I guess it is, in this chamber, I've heard many times the national anthem quoted in different pieces of it. And I today would like to quote the 4 lines of the chorus, I think it's the last 4 lines, which say, we write our names on history's page with expectations great, strict guardians of our heritage, firm craftsmen of our faith. And it's the firm craftsmen of our faith that I want to focus on. To be a firm craftsman of our faith, surely we cannot be relying on loans, grants, handouts, whatever it might be, forever and evermore. We have got to stand on our own 2 feet, and I want to see a reset as to what is the plan for so doing. So those are my general comments about the budget. As I said, I endorse everything Senator Boyce has said. I think it was it's excellent where all the metrics are pointing that we're going in the right direction, and I congratulate the government for so doing. But let me speak to a few of the measures in the budget and give you my particular take on it. Let me start with the duty-free, kitchen equipment, and wine. What this measure is seeking to do is to rebalance the difference between our individual restaurants, which are not part of a hotel, with the restaurants within a hotel who are getting significant benefits. They get duty-free liquor, they get duty-free wine, they get duty-free equipment, they get duty-free proteins, everything they get. The essence of Barbados tourism is not that. Tourists who come to Barbados stay in one hotel room, but they travel all over this island. They eat in Martins Bay, or they eat in St. Peter's Bay, or they eat in Whole Town, and they travel around. That is the essence of Barbadian tourism. That's why we have a robust rental car fleet. That's why we have robust restaurants, attractions, etc. We do not want to have a situation where tourists arrive to this island, they go to Hotel A, and they never leave Hotel A. This measure is an excellent measure, but it is not complete, because it limits only to duty-free equipment or kitchen equipment and wine, and it specifically excludes liquor, which is a significant profit center for all of these restaurants, and there is absolutely no reason why an individual restaurant who is earning 60% of its revenue is in foreign exchange, because that's the criteria the government has come up with. Why is it that liquor has been excluded? I would encourage government to look back at that measure and just broaden it so as to do, in fact, what they had sought to do, which was to put them on even keel. The budget says wine and kitchen equipment and protein. Liquor is, in fact, left out. So I then turn to the rental cars, charge of $10 per day. Now, before anyone here or otherwise says Senator Mallalieu has a conflict of interest, let me declare I do have a small investment in a rental car company. So I declare my interest in that upfront. Having said that, though, that means that I have access to the accurate data. And, sir, the data given in the budget is that the government currently collects about $300,000 per year in licenses for non-Barbadian license holders who seek to drive here. That would mean, basically, that 3,000 people come to the island and rent a car and pay the $10. I suspect there are a lot more people that just don't pay the $10, to be quite honest, but government says they collected 300,000. Sir, this $10 per day being added to the rental cars, I would like to now give you an estimate so that we can compare what we're talking about removing. Now, before I get there, let's understand that the rental car industry in Barbados is a direct tourism service. It is the only direct tourism service that has no concessions at all, like any of the other direct tourism services. It pays full VAT, it pays full duty on all its cars. When it goes in, when the rental car driver goes and fills up the tank with gas, they're paying all their VAT, everything is paid. There is no concession for this. $10 per day, 6,000 rental car permits. A rental car permit to get one costs $3,500 the first time, and it costs $1,000 every time you change that car. So generally, about every 3 years, it would change the car. But just going on the average rental across the industry, that $300,000 is going to $14.4 million. From $300,000 to $14.4 million. That's 6,000 rental car permits, 6,000 rental cars with an average occupancy, and we know how many times they're rented, and it's at $10 per day that is rented. To give you an idea in percentage terms, because we sometimes like to talk about these things in percentage terms, the average daily rate for a rental car in Barbados today is about $80 per day. When you add $10 per day, you're adding 12.5% to that cost. On top of that, there's a 17.5% VAT. So for every rental car, there is a 30% tax that government is going to collect, plus the fuel tax. What this is likely to do, and maybe I'll come to that afterwards. We also have a small problem in this, which I'm sure the government will address no matter what they do in the end with these, is that you have people who have rented cars and you have contractual obligations for the next 9 to 12 months. So that's going to have to be addressed because you have fixed prices on that today. How you add a tax after the fact is, we've had to do this before, so I'm sure we'll figure it out. I wanted to also give you a comparison to other rental cars around the region and let you know that as it stands today, even before this tax, Barbados is one of the highest, if not the highest, cost of rental cars in the entire region. Sir, we cannot afford to become uncompetitive in this area. This is just unnecessary. I cannot see the justification for moving from $300,000 a year in revenue to $14.4 million. So, sir, I will skip to my conclusion on this and say to you, the government has mentioned that in the presentation that they will find a way to bring these, I'll use the word rogue, but the non-registered hired cars into the fold. I'm not aware how that's going to be done, sir, but what I am aware is that I am not aware that there has never been a single instance that a private operator has been brought to justice to date on this. There's not been one instance of it to date. So maybe in the future we're going to see a lot of it, maybe not. My fear, sir, is that all we will do with this tax is that we will drive legitimate hired car operators underground because it will make them uncompetitive. I do encourage government to consult with the industry, recognize that it pays full duty on the cars, recognize it pays full VAT, and recognize the difference in the revenue, and perhaps revisit it, which I am sure a reasonable government will do. Okay, sir. I would then like to move my thoughts again back to what seems to be the attitude of our big, strong-armed North American neighbor. America first is what they say. I'm all for Barbados first. And I think that we have an interesting opportunity that has been created by this tariff war. Because, sir, tariffs are simply the other side of the double entry accounting that you and I know so well to concessions, right? Yes. So if we decided to subsidize something, that's equivalent to put in a tariff on something that you were going to bring in from overseas. There's no different. What they're saying is we are going to put a tariff on importation of aluminum or cars from Canada or whatever it might be. The object of that is, the net effect of that, sir, is to subsidize the ones that they make locally. So I am all in favor, if this is the way that they're going to go, let's agree. And let's agree that when the WTO went after us and destroyed our sugar industry and destroyed the banana industry and pineapple industry in other countries, that it is time for us to accept that they're right, that there are some things that are worth subsidizing and are in our national interest. And I believe, thank you, I believe that our agriculture industry is worth such. I believe that we should develop subsidies that will ensure that every square inch of our remaining agriculture, arable land is put back into production. We cannot compete at the scale of our competitors in any of these products. Maybe there's some that, in that new place, that maybe they're smoking, I don't know, maybe we can compete there, I'm not sure about that part of it, but the truth is that I am sure people can even produce yams cheaper than we can produce them here. Bananas, everything. They can produce it in quantity, harvest it, ship it here cheaper than we can do it. We need to subsidize all parts of it so that our agriculture industry becomes competitive again, and we can again have this country self-sufficient with its food. So I think, again, I didn't participate in the elections. I don't choose what their policies are. This is the policy. Let's react to it. That's all we can do. So, sir, on the subject, though, of agriculture and our plantations, I do hope that with these incentives, whatever they might be, and I'm encouraging the government to consult quickly with all stakeholders in it to find what those incentives would be, so that within the next 5 years, we can be self-sufficient in all of these areas, in ground provisions, in vegetables, in poultry, in dairy, in pork, in beef, in fishing, everywhere. We need to look at it. And when we're doing that, you know, there's going to be some benefits that come from it. One of the problems that we have, and we've spoken about in this chamber before, has been soil erosion, flooding, lack of groundwater. And I once before have said in here that I thought it would be in our interest to increase the fee that we pay to the agriculture landowners who keep their suck wells in working condition. Because we cannot afford to have one drop of rainwater go wasted. We need it in our aquifer. It cannot be run off where it takes our good soil with it. We've got to capture it. So I believe that we've got to look back again, and I'm calling again for government to look at mechanism to pay our agriculture landowners to maintain the suck wells, because we all need that drinking water. And sir, in that area, I'm also encouraging government to look carefully at drone technology. We have a little bit of a mismatch today as to where, you know, what's the nefarious use of drones, but the reality is within our agriculture sector is that drones can be used for insecticides. It can be used even, I was absolutely amazed, sir, I don't know if you have seen it, you see these drones now that are harvesting the bananas. They are harvesting the fruit on the trees. And because they don't damage the tree in the way in which a human would have to go and do it. And I'm encouraging government to look at the use of drones for this purpose and give the agriculture sector a bit of ease to be able to do that. Obviously, you have to find a way that we don't have a problem with the airport and other areas, but we need to look at it quickly. There are solutions for it. The truth is, sir, that we today have the last generation of experienced and knowledgeable agriculturalists left. Our industry has been so decimated that no young people have come into it. I shouldn't say no, of course there are some. Few have come into it. And if we can get every square inch of arable land back into production, if it becomes a viable career for our young people and we can feed ourselves, we will see people choosing to do that. I cannot list all of the benefits that this could have for our country, whether it be manicured, whether we be feeding ourselves, the savings on foreign exchange, it just goes on and on. So I really do hope that we can look at that suggestion. And in so doing, we will be staying true to that last line of the chorus and become firm craftsmen of our faith. Mr. President, I turn my attention now to the residential subdivision of land. And I know for the last few years within this chamber, many people have been surprised as to how I have spoken out against the ongoing subdivision of land. And I shall do it again, but this time with a bit more data that has come out in the last 12 months. We've heard from the Minister of Housing, we've heard from the Commissioner of BRA, we've heard in other places that we have 38,000 vacant residential lots. 38,000, sir. I don't understand. If we have 38,000 vacant residential lots, please could someone tell me what would be the need to remove another acre of agricultural land for the purpose of residential subdivision? Senator King, I heard your comments as well on this subject about competing land uses, and you're absolutely correct. In a small island like ours, we need commercial, we need hotels, we need recreation, we need housing, we need agriculture, we need parkland, we need mining. That is true, but the pendulum has swung too far, sir. It's swung too far. We can't have 38,000 vacant lots and still be subdividing more agricultural land. But, sir, we also heard, I believe it was in that other place by the Minister of Housing, that the government's estimate is that for lands that they have compulsory acquired for which they have not paid for, they estimate that it is $300 million. Oh, no, sir, I will speak on this at a time, perhaps when the resolution that I introduced might come to be debated, and I shall give more detail at that time. But for now, what I will say is that this cannot be right, that we have situations where land has been acquired, has been used, and in some cases sold onwards, but the original landowner has never been paid. That is not right. So I think we will debate that at another time, I think, possibly. But the main point is that I today, and I probably will get a few stones thrown at me from outside this chamber, but it is my humble opinion that we should immediately halt all change of use applications for residential land for the purpose of residential. I think we should put a stop to that immediately until we have a full and complete understanding of these 38,000 vacant residential lots and how they can be used and how we can go vertically so as to address what Senator King had talked about, which is the competing uses of our land. While on housing, a great deal has been said about the Hope project. And I don't know a lot about it, and I'm not planning to spend any time on it either. What I will say is that in my professional career within real estate, which is now, I think this is my 28th or 29th year practicing full-time in the area of real estate, I am not aware of any significant residential project from any government that has gone exactly to plan. Every single one ends up with some type of issue with it, whether it's over budget, under delivery, wasn't the specification, whatever it might be. And as I have said before, when you see that, what should we learn from it? Perhaps we should learn that that's not an area that government should be playing in. On the other side, we have great private sector companies who have delivered over 5,000 homes during that same period, both locally and exported internationally. So I am curious of it, and I understand, don't think that I am in any way pointing fingers at this government. I am saying that as a government, there are things that they do well, regulation, etc., etc. There are things that history tells us don't go so well. And this certainly seems to be one. Perhaps, in the end, this one will be sorted out. I don't know. But I leave it. That leads me to the potable water tank, which was in the budget as well. And I say, sir, finally. When I was telling my wife about this, and I digress for a moment with your permission, sir, because I'm going to get myself into trouble here, but I am reminded that sometimes, you know, I have to tell my wife, listen, when you ask me to do something, you don't have to remind me about it every 6 months. I will do it. The potable water tank, 20 years, sir, 20 years. So thank you. Finally. This makes sense. I am encouraging, I see that we have a minimum size for it. Personally, I would love to have seen it based upon the square footage or the number of bedrooms or something, because the truth is that for every, if you think about if it's 800 gallons, every 1,000 homes that you build, you're basically building a reservoir. It makes good sense. There is one problem, sir, that I would like to highlight with it, and we have to be careful, because I have a potable water tank at my own home, is that the water needs to be circulated, needs to be used, which means that you need to use an electric pump all the time. We do not want people getting sick and simply putting this water tank in place and then thinking that, oh, well, 6 months from now, when the water goes off, I will then use it, right? We need to make sure that we build the regulations around that so that we don't have a problem with that. And I hope that we will also be doing this for the multi-story condominium buildings. Many of them have had to do it anyhow because the water pressure, once you get above 3 or 4 stories, becomes a problem. So they've had to do it. But I hope that we will also build some more robust regulations around that. Senator Paris, I must say I really enjoyed your presentation and hearing of the new electric buses, 31, I think you said. But I must disagree with one of the things that you said, and I hope I get this quote correctly. I believe you said, this will help the commuters to get around the country faster. I will disagree with you, because I am in fully support of the buses, don't get me wrong, but the only problem is that Barbados, between St. Philip, St. Michael and St. Peter, is actually a parking lot at certain times of the day. So our buses are going to be, we're going to be traveling in comfort, and they're going to be air conditioned, and they're not going to be polluting because they're electric, and all of that is good. So I agree with everything that you've said. I agree with everything you've said. However, I want to move to the other part of it, which I think we need to deal with. The situation really and truly is getting worse, because it seems now that our roadside vendors have not only taken over the Verge, but in the Warrens area, they've taken over an entire lane. You stop now in the left lane to collect your goods that are being produced in the Verge now. We're down to one lane. The whole question is, that is true. And I don't know how we are continuing on to do this. And in fact, let's not get upset with the coconut water people, because I like a little coconut water just like the rest. But you can buy watermelons, you can get eggs, you can get fruit. And lately I've now seen a garment person selling at the side of the road. So, sir, we really must do something about this. We cannot be building tens of $million-dollar highways for this to happen. It is dangerous. I would like to know what's going to happen. God forbid that someone is killed, but there is going to be an accident. Someone is going to be hurt. This needs to come to an end. But Senator Paris, I have good news. I have a solution for you for this parking lot. And I'm going to embrace not just the first 31 buses, but I would like us to have 131 buses. Because what I would like to do is I'd like to make bus fares free for everyone. Now, I've said this in here before and everyone's laughed at me, so laugh at me again, but I've done the numbers for you this time. And because in these estimates, I'm reliably informed that I cannot see what the revenue is collected in bus fares, that would be in the statutory corporation's books. I'm going to do an estimate for you, sir. And my estimate, I'm going to use a method, Mr. President, you may be familiar with. I'm going to use the WAG method, which of course WAG is a wild guess. And here's how I calculate how much revenue the Transport Board and the other, not just the blue and yellows, all the buses get. I estimate that 10,000 people use the bus each day. And I estimate that they make 2 trips per day. And I estimate that they do this 300 days of the year. Obviously, that's more than just the weekdays, but I'm adding some in for the weekends, and there's public holidays, and school children don't pay, and senior citizens don't pay. So, but I'm going to use that number. And it's $3.50. If you do all of that math, and if my WAG method is correct, the gross takings is $18.2 million per year. $18.2 million. Now, I am happy to be corrected because I don't have the data. I have told you the method that I have used it. 10,000 people, 2 trips per day, 300 days a year at $3.50. The expenditure, thank you for mentioning that, will not go away. The expenditure is the expenditure no matter what. That is already there. I'm only dealing with the revenue. If we make it free, the only thing you lose is the revenue. You keep the expenditure. On the other hand, if we are going to change St. Michael to St. Philip, and St. Michael to St. Peter, and Christchurch to St. Thomas, if we are going to fix this, I have heard the traffic issue. I've heard about flyovers and new bypass roads and widening of roads, etc. Personally, in my experience in seeing what these numbers are, by the time we have finished doing the flyovers and the whatever it might be, you're talking a couple $100 million. That's 10 years worth of free buses. 10 years of revenue on here. 10 times 18.2 million. Round it up to 20 million, 200 million. The argument I am making, sir, is to convert this country into a bus-friendly country, recognizing that it is small, it is tight roads. Encourage people to use these electric buses. Recognize that it is an investment that we are making so that we don't have these polluting cars on the road. Sir, my personal example, I am working right on the outskirts of Warrens. I'm actually in St. James, but St. Thomas and James in the Welches area, and I live in Frere Pilgrim. I have 2 choices, sir. I can leave my house at 6 a.m. and I will get to work in about 25 minutes. If I leave after 6:30 on a morning and I was to take that beautiful highway that we have, you're talking a minimum of an hour, okay? So what do I do instead? Well, I leave for a pilgrim and I go across Carmichael and up through Jordan's, and then I'm going up the Cottage, and then I'm going across by Applewitz and down through Jack in the Box Gully, and you got to do it. It's the only way you can do it. And you come, you come out and you end up in Welches by cost you less, and I get there. It takes me 40 minutes, but it's 40 minutes every day. Whereas the highway, depending on what time I leave home, could be anything from an hour to an hour and a half. But sir, if that is for me, 45 minutes, and I got to do it both ways, that is 90 minutes per day that I am commuting. Now, I am driving and I'm a reasonable guy, so I am not on the phone, I'm not doing emails, I'm not doing texts. Maybe I'm taking a phone call because I have hands-free. But really and truly, it's a minimum of about 90 minutes of unproductive time. So when you factor all of this in, each and every working person in Barbados is probably spending somewhere between 4 and 8 hours commuting in Little Barbados. We need to fix that. We have too many cars on the road. I don't wish to stop people from owning cars. What I would like to do is to incentivize people to use public transportation. When I'm in London, I use public transportation. When I am in Geneva, I use public transportation. When I'm in South America, I use public transportation. Why can we not do it in Barbados in these beautiful electric buses that are air conditioned? That is what we need to do. Two? I was showing you how two. I am glad I've entertained you and gave me a chance to have a sip of my water, as I am coming to the to the end of my notes, and oh my gosh, I've used a fair amount of my time, unusual. So, sir, the last thing on this subject, though, and I know that a lot of people will laugh at me, but I encourage you, think about it a little bit. Think about the idea. Just don't throw it out completely. I'll give you another little bit one, which might be a little controversial again. But I would like to suggest that we do a study and see if we could make Broad Street pedestrian only. So maybe I'm hearing some murmurings that people have already looked at it, but then it's time to let's do it, because it would be great. Recently I have seen in most large cities, that is what they have done. It improves the trade. It encourages people to be there. I actually think that if we take Broad Street and go up to the highest level of the buildings and hang some lovely canvas sails across to give some shaded areas that you could walk through, it could be absolutely lovely, and it could bring it could bring commerce back into Broad Street. It is a pity to see how quiet it is when we have such historic buildings just like the one that we're in. So, sir, in summary, the budget is the budget. I can't change that. I have no disagreement with the budget. I have said to you, let us spend as much time thinking about how to repay the debt as how we're going to get into the debt. Spend a little time on it for me. Tell me what the long-term plan is, or at least let's be honest with our children and say, this $1.15 billion in this fiscal year is your problem, is not our problem. You're going to have to pay for it, and the grandchildren. Secondly, don't expect charity from the world. Those days are done. There is no free lunch. Whether it is grants that have been had so much talk about, money from the IMF, money from the USAID, or money from the Chinese, it all comes at a price. And sometimes that price is our sovereignty. I agree that we need to use taxation to drive the behaviors that we want and to disincentivize the bad behaviors that are already there. But please don't, like in the case of the rental car, don't disincentivize good behavior by putting such a tax on that you will incentivize them to do something different. Please, let's recognize the importance of food security, and let us jump on the change in the world's attitude that tariffs are okay. Subsidies, therefore, are also okay. Once you divide good agricultural land for commercial and for housing, it will never be productive for food again. And finally, sir, I do hope, as I always say, that we can get out of the way of the businesses and facilitate what they're doing. And I am eagerly looking forward to the Leader of Government Business, Senator Lisa Cummins, and my friend, their report on how things are going at Business Barbados and how those benchmarks that we've been promised are coming along. Because I am a bit worried that we're pretty far along in, and I would like to see some of those benchmarks. So, Mr. President, I thank you for indulging me and allowing me to refer to my notes. I think I may have spoken for as long as I've ever spoken. I am not sure what time zone I am in, but with those few words, I am obliged to you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Lalonde. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. President.
and I rise to make my contribution in this debate this morning. And to be from the upfront, Mr. President, this is a critical moment for Barbados, and it is my intention to use my time to go through the issues that concern the people of Barbados. They're concerned about the crime situation, they're concerned about the debt situation, they're concerned about the sluggish performance of the economy. But before I go into that, Mr. President, I would first like to congratulate my colleague, Senator Ryan Walters, for an outstanding performance on Monday, where he laid out for the people of Barbados in terms which they can understand the true issues of facing this country. And I am certain that Barbadians appreciated the depth of research which he went through. And it shows, Mr. President, that this DLP administration, we utilize our talents, we highlight the competencies of our members, and we are not in the habit of pulling down persons or stopping them from shining, as is the situation on the other side, as you can see with Minister Strawn, who was allowed to deliver the poison chalice of the budget last week. Also, you saw it with former Senator Crystal Haynes, who had the audacity to speak up in this chamber, and then she faced the axe from the leader of the government. Our leader does not punish people. Our leader allows the leader of the Democratic Labour Party allows our members to shine, allows them to perform,
order, Senators.
and allows them
want to
to
hear Senator Warren.
contribute.
Order. Honorable Senators, please. Honorable Senators, please. Let us hear Senator Warren. He's allowed to express his opinion.
Thank you,
Senator Warren, please
Mr.
proceed.
President. Mr. President, we do not fight about who gets to lead on this side. Those days are way behind us.
Honorable Senators,
instead, we support each other and allow members to shine, utilize their talents, competencies and abilities to the fullest. And I would have mentioned before the situation on the other side, perhaps they need to speak to their political leader, the Prime Minister of Barbados, and allow some of her ministers the opportunity to shine and to speak. And you know, Senator Cummings in her opening spoke about the Barbados Labour Party surrounding themselves with experts. But when you surround yourself with experts, you should avail yourself to their advice, not surround yourself with experts to silence them. And that is perhaps one of the reasons why this government cannot lay in this chamber or the other place the full extent of the amounts of money paid to consultants in Barbados, because they have basically paid off all of the consultants not for their advice, but so that they will be kept quiet and not critique the government on their poor performance and mismanagement. But, Mr. President, I would like to give you an overview of my presentation today. I intend to do a review of the midterm fiscal review, which should have been laid in October last year, and then the current debt servicing capacity of the country, a review of the budgetary proposal because they're all tied in, a review of the BERT program, which will be ending in June this year, and actually this month is the last review period, and then it would look at the performance of key ministries, including the Ministry of Health. So, Mr. President, I've given you that overview, so that if you see that I'm coming to the end of my time, you might not look at your watch for about half an hour and permit me to get through with what I intend to do today, Mr. President.
I assure you, Senator, I'll be keeping an eagle eye.
But you will be kind. Right, Mr. President, in terms of the review of the midterm review of the economy from April to September 2024, this, as you know, is part of the requirements of the first BERT program from the public sector management Act, which was passed in 2019. That review was laid in the House of Assembly in late last year. Don't believe it met the October deadline. I'm not certain if we actually debated it here in this chamber, so it's still outstanding for debate. So we often wonder, I'm saying this because you've entered into an IMF program with certain checks and balances that should keep the country on an even keel, but yet still we are not necessarily following these things to the T. And even with that review, Mr. President, there were some clear issues which could have alerted this government of the type of budget which it needed to bring to fix some of the challenges which that review highlighted in the economy. The macro overview, it has a misalignment of growth and reality. The government paints a picture of stability, citing modest economic growth. However, the report and the subsequent estimates for 2025 to 2024 and the budget fail to address the pressing concerns such as rising inflation, sluggish private sector investment, and despite global economic uncertainty, the administration has not yet presented a clear strategy to mitigate external shocks that could affect the country's fiscal financial health. And Senator Malalu would have been through a number of those before with the tariff wars, which are going on right now globally, which could impact and see the world economy going into a recession. But yet still this government has tourism as its main focus to take this country through. And we know what would have happened back in 2008 with the global financial meltdown. And you saw persons staying home, not traveling, because they did not have the wherewithal. If that happens in Barbados, what is the solution of this government to fix those issues? Mr. President, there's no clear industrial or economic diversification strategy to safeguard against external economic downturn. They boast about the planned tourism projects, some of which were in the pipeline since the early 2000s, and so far have failed to launch. And there is very little belief that many of these projects would actually be in a position to rescue Barbados. There's weak local business confidence with no major initiatives to stimulate private sector investment. Revenue performance, there's an overestimation and reliance on taxation. This was clear from that assessment. Government revenue collection surpassed targets in some areas, particularly in income and profits. And even though those on that side would boast at these things, that does not speak well, because they also show the shortfall in revenue collection in VAT, goods and services, which means that the people are not spending, and that is a problem. So you have an over-reliance on taxation rather than sustainable revenue growth from production and export. Under this BLP administration, agricultural production is at a standstill. I don't even think they mentioned anything about manufacturing in the estimates that is worth repeating now. VAT and excise taxes on the performance indicate a weak consumer spending, signaling economic distress among the population. The writing was there on the wall from this report, which was laid late in this place. And it shows that the government just laid it because it had to lay it, but they did not pay any attention to it. Because if they had paid attention to it, they would have made the necessary corrections in the estimates and the budget and not place further tax burden on the people of Barbados. When you go across Barbados, Senator Malalu just spoke about Broad Street and stopping traffic from going up Broad Street. But you could do that because when you travel across Broad Street, you hardly see anybody there during the day shopping. When you look into Cape Shepherd, the ground floor is empty, but you see the tourists walking on the boardwalk and all about. So it makes me wonder who is spending duty-free, buying duty-free shopping in Barbados. And where is it happening? A number of the storefronts on Broad Street are actually closed. What is happening? And not just Broad Street, but you go to St. Lawrence Gap and I would constantly say, I take it from the gas stations that close off at 10 o'clock at night, especially on a Saturday night. It means that people are not out there spending. They're not out there engaging in social activities. All of these things were there, but the government paid no attention to it. The expenditure performance. Government expenditure continues to grow, outpacing revenue. The report reveals that while wages and salaries remain stable, capital expenditure has increased, yet with minimal transparency and efficiency. There are ballooning interest payments on debt, $790 million, diverting resources from critical development, which means that the government is not investing in sufficient capital expenditure to give a stimulus to the economy, to grow the economy. Government is spending most of its money in terms of repaying its debt. And that is why you cannot see a new school built in Barbados. That is why you cannot see the necessary repairs and upgrading to the hospital facilities and the polyclinic facilities across Barbados. That is why you have not seen any new infrastructural projects in this country based on this government. When the Democratic Labour Party was in office, we built houses. You cannot even get the houses done because you start them wrong. You cannot deliver on housing for the people of Barbados. When the Democratic Labour Party was in office, we built new office accommodation for our civil servants. Have you built any? When the Democratic Labour Party was in office, you have not even fixed. You have not even been able to do something with the Greenland dump, as you mentioned, Vaucluse, which is pretty close to Greenland landfill. It just shows that this government has a history of not being able to spend money to benefit the people of Barbados. And all of what is happening reeks of possible corruption. The government's failure to curb spending in non-essential areas exacerbates fiscal risks. The frequent travel miles being racked up by the Prime Minister and her entourage spending on consultants, the lavish spending on regathering, and the other extravagant activities with no real return to the public, failed Trident ID card, launch, failed BTMI slogan, the list goes on. The debt service payments remain alarmingly high, consuming resources. No structural plan for the debt reduction, instead relying on refinancing. It is the correct speech. Government. This government, Mr. President, has sold out the interests of the agriculture and manufacturing in favor of the merchants. They have a habit of import and put 100% on it, but you saw nothing in the budget to stimulate agriculture. Furthermore, this government can be, as Senator Walters would have said with the compact, basically eroded the performance of the agricultural sector in this country. But, Mr. President, I continue with my presentation. And it shows that this government has not prepared to deal with the challenges. They took the easy road out in terms of going to the IMF. And yes, they brought down the debt. But now, less than 7 years, we find ourselves in a situation where the debt is almost back to where it was. So the Barbadians who face the hardship at the NIS in terms of taking the haircut, and now this government forcing Barbadians to retire at close to 70, may very well find themselves in another situation a couple months from now, because they have not made it clear whether or not they're going back to the IMF. They've hinted to it, but they have not made it clear whether or not they're going back to the IMF after this current BERT program, and to bring additional hardship on the people of Barbados. They want to give you the impression that there is bounty going on in Barbados, but I'm so certain that former Prime Minister, the late Owen Arthur, is rolling in his grave in St. Peter without a headstone when he speak about the budgetary proposal and the fact that this government intends to tax its way out of this situation, taking every penny out of the hands of Barbadians.
Mr. President, I rise reluctantly on a point of order, and I repeatedly tell my colleagues I don't think we should intervene. We can heckle, but we're not intervene. But I have so much respect and reverence for the late Professor Wayne Arthur to allow the comment that we have left his grave without a headstone to pass. It is untrue. I believe that the Honorable Senator may be speaking in ignorance. So his statement, though well scripted, is incorrect. And therefore, I believe he has now misled the House. There is a wonderful headstone at Mount Pleasant in tribute and honor to the late, great Professor Wayne Arthur.
Thank you very much, Senator Guzman. Senator Worrell, given the Parliament, they have a former leader of the country, a long-standing member of the Parliament, both in this chamber and the other chamber. You want to withdraw that error and move on so that 1,000 years from now, the record would not reflect the error.
So withdrawn, Mr. President, at least he did not have issues with the fact that he is rolling in his grave. Nonetheless, as a result of the poor economic performance of this government.
You are allowed that opinion. I just urge you not to try to do research on it to prove it as fact. We restrict our research to the above ground facts. Stay above ground, please. Please continue, Senator Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am not just speaking, I am speaking based on facts, Mr. President. And if you look at the estimates of this government over the last couple of years, from 2018 to 2019, they often speak about the debt to GDP. Yes, we know that the GDP of the country has increased because the government, based on the IMF program and work done by Carter, they would have done the regrading exercise and made some adjustments to how you calculate the GDP. But have you heard them speak of the debt service of this country? And when you look at the percentage of the total the debt service as a percentage of total expenditure, in 2018-2019, it was 37.37%. And these all come from the estimates, Mr. President. 2019, 2020, 22.23%, good. You lowered it. 2020 to 2021, with COVID, it went back up a little bit, 26.16%. And then 2021 to 2022, 23.88%. But then we go from 2022 to 2023, 25.42%, 23 to 24, 31.24%, 24 to 25, 34.23%, and for this current year, 26 to 25, is projected to be 24.25 to 26. It is projected to be 34%. This shows, Mr. President, that this government they did the debt restructuring and then they went back and borrowed back all of the money. And now they're spending the majority of the money in servicing debt. What money is left? What money is left on capital projects? What money is left to grow the economy? And this is precisely the reason why you cannot get an ease in that. You can't get an ease in the fuel tax. You can't get an ease at the port, because this government is dependent on the high taxation in order to help them service the debt, not to pave new roads, not to build out the economy, and not to support growth in this country, Mr. President. And that is what you need, because you need to take Barbados off of the one leg of tourism, and you need to put some money into agriculture. As Senator Malalou said, we need to face the reality that we need to subsidize our agricultural sector. Because of all of these tariff wars, we need to be in a position to feed ourselves healthy food. We need to put more emphasis on our manufacturing sector and on exports. None of that was in the budget, which I will come to at this time, Mr. President. None of that. One would have hoped that the 2025 budget would have presented a vision of economic stability and growth. However, it has several shortcomings that impacts its effectiveness, and the proposals lack realism, execution capacity, fairness, and long-term stability. As I said, there was an unrealistic economic projection. Everything in this budget was based on the world remaining as it is, that the tourism numbers continue to grow, even though the tourism numbers in Barbados are declining. I heard it said by the chairman of the BTI on their road trip in Europe that they are facing decreased numbers from Europe. And they're also facing decreased numbers from the UK market as well. And even though this government boasts that those numbers are being picked up by the US market, the US traditionally does not spend, and they do not stay in Barbados for a long period of time. You are talking about people who come to Barbados for a weekend, 4 days, the most of it. But when you speak about the UK, 2 weeks to 3 months or more, that is what they spend. They stay here, and they utilize the supermarkets, the restaurants, the rental cars, all of those areas. But this government has not done anything to stimulate those things. As Senator Malulu said, I'm glad that I came after you. The tax on the rental vehicles is cumbersome, and it is a burden, and it makes the tourism industry uncompetitive.
Mr. President, I raise on a point of order.
Yes, what's the point of order?
The standing orders of this House requires members to speak in the English language. And I'm sure that even with the greatest AI technology, the word cumbersome will not be found in a dictionary or in AI.
And thank you, Senator Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. President. And that was his intervention. The point is, the $10 a day tax is difficult for the rental companies to actually administer, because when you speak about persons renting a vehicle from you for 6 months and you give them a special rate, now you have to come and put on a $10 tax for every single day. That is going to be problematic for persons in the rental car industry, and it will make the industry uncompetitive. There was insufficient relief in the budget for cost of living, which many Barbadians are crying out for. I don't know if Senator Nichols wants to raise on a point of order to refute that, but they did absolutely nothing to deal with the cost of living in Barbados, so that when you go to the supermarket at the end of the month, you will probably be paying the same thing or even more. And to add to it, when you receive your paycheck at the end of April, you receive less in your pocket because of the resilience tax, which will now be increased from 0.1% to 2.25%, and then the employers also have to foot a portion of that as well. So this government is not doing anything to reduce the cost of living in Barbados, which bothers mothers, which bothers every single household in Barbados the most. The political leader of the Democratic Labour Party called for adjustment in the light and power bills. I would hope that they can go further and do something in terms of reducing the electricity bills and also the cost of fuel in this country, because all of those things undermine the performance of the manufacturing sector, the agricultural sector, every single sector in Barbados, and contribute to the increase in the cost of living. There was little support for local business, but you have a government that is willing to give away precious land close to the beachfront of Barbados to a multi-billion-dollar bank. And I remember in 2021, 2022, this same government fought tooth and nail. I don't know if the matter has been ended as yet, to to take away the land just across the road adjacent to that property from a local entrepreneur and investor. One of the only economic projects in this country that has saved a number of small businesses, and especially in the tourism sector, Savvy on the Bay. So why you want to take the land from Savvy on the Bay, but give the land on the opposite side of the road to a billion-dollar bank? Not that we do not, and let us make it clear, we do not have any issues with the bank or with working with our African counterparts, but we think that it should be done in a way that is fair to all Barbados and is transparent and above board. Don't treat it the way how you did the Old Town Civic Center, which has promoted a march in this country on Saturday from Folkestone to Old Town because of the people of Barbados recognize that they can no longer trust this government. You had, after the senator got up in here and pleaded for it not to be sold, the senior minister came a couple days after and said it was not a done deal. And then, by the beginning of this month, in Parliament, read a ministerial statement that gave you the impression, all when the talk, it done gone through. So when you can forget about it, don't care what it is. You can take it or you can lump it, but the Barbados Labour Party ain't giving up their night rest with nothing that they intend to do. And it makes you wonder, why is it that this government would have gone to a republic in the middle of COVID-19 when many Barbadians could not have been able to participate in the activities or have much of a say on it? Is it because you intend that this government intends that whatever they want to do, they will do, and there will be no fair checks and balances to them? They need to put down that level of arrogance. They need to put it down and listen to the people of Barbados, especially a government that campaign on transparency and accountability. And then in the dead of the night, they pass legislation in a chamber which they have the complete majority. They don't need the support of anybody else without question. And we find out about these things later, and then they deny it. They deny it to the hilt until the information is exposed in the media and the facts come out. You can get up on a point of order to contravene any of those things. But I'm saying to you, it is not right, and this government needs to check itself. Mr. President, with regard to the IMF program, which comes to an end in June this year, many Barbadians may not know that the last review period for that program will be the end of this month in March. So all of the checklists that the government needed to check in order to get the drawdown, which will come in June, need to be completed in the end of March. But what it also does, it gives, to me, this government a grace period, a free-for-all, where they can possibly, between April 1st and June or whenever they decide to go back into an IMF program, that they can lick out and spend the taxpayers' money however they see fit. And that is exactly what I got from the estimates, the appropriation bill, which I will come to examining shortly. Because Barbadians need to be vigilant and recognize that after March 31st, and the reason why we are here today to pass this appropriation bill, after the last review period will be done for things happening up to March 31st. And then the government will get their drawdown, which is due to them in June. The current program comes to an end, and it is up to the government to determine whether or not they will enter into another program. Based on the poor performance of the economy, I somehow think that they may very well find themselves going back there, but they may be using the time in between March and whenever they go into the next program to start their election campaigning, and using the Treasury of Barbados to provide the $300 to buy a vote. And I'm asking Barbadians to be vigilant and look for that.
You're well aware of the rules of debate, which says that you, honorable member, cannot impute improper motives to a member of either house, and that would be highly improper. Indeed, it would be illegal you will withdraw that and have it struck from the records.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so withdraw it.
Thank you very much.
But I continue.
Mr. President.
Yes, Madam Deputy President.
Sir, I am rising on a point of order a little late, but I'm deeply concerned about another statement by the Honourable Senator that made its way into the record, and I'm asking to have it struck. It is the matter of the statement that the government comes into the House in the dead of night, does matters clandestinely, this is my language, not that which was used, does matters clandestinely, and no one knows until it is ferreted out. I think that that is a very dangerous and inaccurate and untrue thing to allow to stand on the record and go into the public domain. In fact, all hearings, all matters that come by way of legislation and in this Parliament are in the public domain. Every single one is broadcast and telecast and is online and can be accessed at any time while they are current and indeed in the future. On top of that, there is a record of the Hansard record, and further, when there are parliamentary sittings, whether of the lower or upper chamber, all members, including members of the opposition, are invited and are aware. So for the Honourable Senator to say that we come in, we do this legislation or pass legislation in the dead of night, nobody knows, they'll only hear of it after. And so really, it's just so grossly inaccurate, it cannot be allowed to stand.
I agree that would also breach the rule about improper motive, and in terms of practicality, it really is not so. None of us will want to withdraw that invitation about clandestinely passing legislation. It can't be secret, it can't be clandestine. The process is a public process, and all of our hearings are on YouTube, live, and open to everyone. So you'll want to withdraw that. You could restate your point, but certainly not to suggest that there is any clandestine activity by the Parliament, whether the Parliament be constituted by a majority of one side or the other. The process is the same, and neither of them is able to clandestinely, in the dead of night, do things that the public is not aware of. So please withdraw, have that struck for the record, and let us move on.
Thank you, Mr. President. I follow your ruling. But in terms of clarifying, yes, the debates are done within this chamber, but with very little explanation. And I use as a classic example, in recent times, I wonder how many Barbadians would know that a supplementary for over $329 million was passed in the other place with very little detail about the heads other than just reading the broad description of what the head is. And one of those areas was $33 million under the Ministry of Health for the purpose of recruitment of nurses from Ghana. In my opinion, Mr. President, that was not outlined in the debate, and no explanation was given to the people of Barbados of how that $33 million was spent. And I believe that issues like that is what I was referring to in terms of debates being rushed through the chamber without proper explanation and detail to the public of Barbados from a government that promised transparency and accountability.
Senator Walker, I want to rise.
Mr. President, I hate to interrupt the honourable member when he feels he's doing well. The $33 million in the supplementary that was discussed, I believe, 2 weeks ago, was, among other things, to pay for the transport of the nurses here. If he's following his documents clearly, he would know, and they've said it before, that the QH was allocated less funds in 24-25 than the year previously. During the course of the year, the government has had to provide drawdowns to the QH because of the decline in the funds from the NIS Health Levy, which I believe, Mr. President, you are familiar with, and we're looking at the anomalies and stuff like that. The $33 million for a large part was provided to the hospital to do several other things, to make up the shortfall from the health levy during the course of the year, and also to pay for the travel of the nurses here. It was not $33 million to bring Ghanaian nurses to Barbados. That's not true.
Thank you, Senator Walker. And Senator Burrell, you're free to hold a view that more explanation can be given on any matter which is before the House, but that doesn't raise it to the level of clandestine, which is a different imputation. So I hope you take the point.
Mr. President, we already dealt with the clandestine part. I'm dealing on the part of the explanation, and nowhere in the documentation which was presented in the other place and shared with us here did the explanation which the Minister of Health gave, and we should not have to be guessing. We should not have to be begging for information. The details should have been there. And I said what I said because that is clearly what was stated next to the $33 million recruitment of nurses from Ghana. And I questioned it in my mind, and I want to question it before the Senator, the Honorable Minister of Health, who would have an opportunity to speak sometime after me, if he would be willing to give a more detailed breakdown, line by line, of how that $33 million was made up, and actually how much money was actually spent to recruit nurses from Ghana, and what is being done to shore up the recruitment of nurses in Barbados, so that we can have a comparative analysis on the amount spent on nurses from Ghana and what could be done in terms of creating meaningful employment and training for Barbadians to assist in the health sector in this country. That is the point that I would like to make, and kindly, Mr. President, I will move on. Mr. President, this brings me quickly to my review of some government sectors, some ministries. And the first on my list does happen to be the Ministry of Health. Now, over the years, Mr. President, we have noticed that there has been a decline in the spending of the Ministry of Health. There is stated within these estimates that at one point the objective was to reduce the government's contribution to health and transfer more of the payment to patients in terms of upfront costs, which you would see which would have happened in terms of the drug service, the contribution at the drug service, which was $7 and I think increased sometime last year. But Mr. President, after COVID, this spending pattern should be revised, as it has been revised internationally, because as a result of COVID, you recognize that there are more persons with healthcare challenges. And that is why you see here Barbadians complaining about the quality of service at the QEH, and then you hear the QEH begging Barbadians not to come to their accident and emergency department, especially now that it's facing an influx of persons due to vehicular accidents, the shootings and the stabbings as a result of the criminal activity going around Barbados. And many persons may not know, but when there is a violent shooting or stabbing in Barbados, the QEH actually locks down its emergency department as a safeguard measure. Now, Mr. President, what I am suggesting is that we really need to look at the amount of spending in the healthcare sector. The world standard after COVID has expressed that government spend in the region of 9 to 11% in terms of preparing their healthcare sector for future pandemics, which you often hear about, the possibility of future pandemics which can cripple the globe just as COVID did. Right now, we are spending at 2.71% of our GDP on healthcare. No doubt, as a result of that, that is why you hear Barbadians complaining about the long waits in accident and emergency. Barbadians complaining about not being able to, having to take 3 and 4 trips to the polyclinics in order to get medication. All of those things. I do note that within the budget, that the Ministry of Health has allocated some funds, especially to upgrade the St. John Polyclinic, the David Thompson Polyclinic, with ultrasounds and other diagnostic tools. This is something that should be done and practiced across all of the polyclinic networks in Barbados. So if you really want patients not to go to the accident and emergency department at QEH, they must be able to go to the polyclinics and get comparative treatment and not be told when they get there, you have to go to the QEH to get an x-ray, or you have to go to the QEH to get a blood test. These simple machinery can be placed within the polyclinic network for less than $100,000, which would allow the doctors the capacity to be able to do some of these tests and actually take the burden off of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. It would also allow them to do more in the primary care setting in dealing with some of these cases before they become emergencies. Because if persons go to the polyclinic setting and are treated for their non-communicable diseases and are detected early, it will reduce the amount of persons who have to end up at accident and emergency in the dead of the night to get treatment. I hope that does not offend anybody at this point in time. But these are things that need to be done. And with regard to non-communicable diseases, Mr. Speaker, non-communicable diseases are responsible in one case alone, persons with kidney care. In about 2015, I think that we spent about $15 million for dialysis for all of the persons on dialysis in Barbados. The amount of persons requiring dialysis have increased tremendously over the years, that we are now facing a possibility of having to spend between $20 to $25 million, and the number keeps growing. These figures are unsustainable. And the best way to fight these things is to have in place a program to deal with the non-communicable diseases and to promote health and wellness. Yes, in the budget we saw that the funds allocated to promote health and wellness was roughly $1 million. So I don't know if they're taking the $423,000, which was already allocated, or if this is new money that is being allocated. But my question, Mr. Speaker, is this. We already have the sugar tax, which brings in, we don't see it in these documentations because it's lumped all under excise tax, but when it was reported, I think it was about $10 million. The salt tax, which is about to come in, should possibly net the same $10 million or more. Why is it that you could only find $1 million to go towards the fight of NCDs when more could be done at the community level in terms of getting more of our people out in active exercise, nutrition programs, all of these things? Because you have a serious challenge in getting persons to comply with their diets. Because the family members may think one thing, but the nutritionists think something else. And if the nutritionists have the opportunity to interface with the patients and the family members more often, I believe that you will see greater compliance in the diet, and you will see better control of the NCDs within our population. We definitely need to do more to control our NCDs, yes, in this country, Mr. President. So I'm hoping, up to today, I think there's a long article in the paper with a person having issues with the way how a parent was dealt with at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. You hear constant complaints. Many Barbadians are afraid to go to the QEH for services. I have heard of so many situations where people going to the QEH for simple procedures and not making it out. And it baffles the family. It baffles everyone how this is happening. And I'm hoping that when the minister with responsibility for health speaks in this debate, he does it from a sober perspective and really engage Barbadians and allow them to know what is really going on within healthcare in Barbados, and if they will have any hope, if the hope Barbadians will be able to restore their hope in the healthcare sector in Barbados, because it is failing tremendously, not only at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but also at the polyclinics. Even the environmental health department is under threat in Barbados as well. Once before, you would see an environmental health officer in your community looking at the bush and the rodents and all of those things at least every quarter. No, you probably see them once a year because there are not enough staff to do it. All of these are things that need to be addressed going forward in this country, Mr. President. And as the Democratic Labour Party, if the Honourable Minister does not know how to deal with it, the Democratic Labour Party does. And we will put the plans in place when the time comes. And we will share, and we've already shared freely with you some of those steps, but the people of Barbados need to hear from you, from the Honourable Minister of Health, what are the plans to save the healthcare sector in Barbados. Mr. President, I now come to the Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources. I looked at this ministry because when I looked at these estimates, and the amount of money which was anticipated to be spent in this country, I said to myself, this seems to be an election estimate based on the amount of money which was allocated in certain ministries to be spent. And the Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources is a classic example for that. And this is important for us to look at during this appropriation debate, because there is no metric to monitor and evaluate the performance of the Ministry of Transport and Works. If the ministry tells you that they're going to spend $2 million to repair roads, we don't know how many kilometers of roads would be done with that $2 million, or none of that information is provided. You don't have a gauge. You don't have a gauge of how many roads will actually be done by the ministry in that particular time, especially if the work is done by MTW. Because we do know that the money will be expensed by MTW to do a road. All of the material will be placed there for the road. The laborers will turn up every single day, meaning that they're being paid. And the road is expected to be finished by the end of the financial year. And from the start of the financial year to the end of the financial year, you can't see anything being done on it, but money was spent. And then the next financial year, another set of money will be allocated to fix or repair the very same road. So that is the point that I am making, that there is no metric to monitor and evaluate the performance of the ministry. So it's a classic way for campaign financing, making it into the pockets of friends and family.
Senator Warren, you are well aware of the rules. And you know, the rules are not only clear, but let us also be clear. With the broadcast of the messaging, even though of the speeches, even though we will say straight from the record, senators are exploiting the reality because the matter has gone there. I will not let you do that. You know that you can't do that. Leave that for when the platform is mounted and you are out there. That is for another purpose. Please withdraw that. Have it struck from the record. You cannot accuse a party of election financing through road works and all that you said. Let us please respect the rules and the standard orders. There you cannot impute improper motives to members of either house in your speeches.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm so guided by your ruling, and I will continue, Mr. President. I withdraw the comment. So guided by your ruling.
Yes, proceed.
Yeah. Mr. President, I do continue, but Mr. President, I do continue. The Ministry of Transport and Works, Mr. President, is a clear candidate for a special audit, especially with the amount of funds which I've seen allocated to this ministry in this current estimate. Now, let me just look at some of the information. Under the heading of Program 510, Road Network Services, Tenantry Roads, there's a huge jump in assets under construction from 1.2 million for 2024 to 2025 to 5.7 million for 2025 to 2026. Now, this ministry in 2023 to 2024 was only able to spend $224,000, not million, $224,000 in a year for this same project. So I would really like to have a clear explanation of how $5.7 million can now all of a sudden be allocated for this ministry when the practice has only been able to spend $224,000. Those are things that are alarming and suggest to me that this is an election estimate. The same argument can be made through the actual expenditure. This is for the next program, Program 498, Road Rehabilitation through CAF. Well, I do know that you got CAF loans, so maybe you would be able to do more expenditure under that. But the actual expenditure in 2023 to 2024 was 8.9 million. The allocation was almost double in 2024 to 2025 of 15 million. So I would really like to know how much of that was actually spent during this period. It should have been in the midterm review, at least the start of the spending on that project. The next program, Highway Construction and Maintenance Services, which I find most alarming, Mr. President. Because there was normally a ratio between the assets under construction and the statutory allowance for this. This is work which is actually done by the MTW. So, for example, in 2023 to 2024, the assets under construction was $27 million, and the statutory personal emoluments was $12 million, so almost a 2-to-1 ratio. When you look at 2024 to 2025, the assets under construction was $14 million, and the assets under construction would go towards the purchase of the materials because they need to have the materials in order to work with. $14 million, and the personal emoluments, $10 million. So you can almost see the relationship. But now you come to this current estimates. The assets under construction is $13 million, but there's this massive increase in the personal emoluments of $14.2 million. So you're going to employ more people to do less work. That is what this is saying to me. So I would be glad if you can give some sort of explanation of this election math within the estimates, Mr. President. In my opinion, the ministry is a prime candidate for a special audit by the Auditor General. And I would hope that, I know that Senator Nurse yesterday made mention of the function of the Auditor General. And he was corrected by the leader of government business, Senator Cummins, in saying that the Public Accounts Committee last met in June of 2024. But what Senator Cummins failed to elucidate about is that at that same meeting, now the Public Accounts Committee is set up to scrutinize the accounts of the government. So it would make full sense for the opposition to have the right to put on the agenda the accounts which they would want to scrutinize, not for the government to want to make the agenda of what they want the Public Accounts Committee to look at. And Senator Cummins don't have to rise on a point of order because I do know that she led the charge on behalf of the government in making sure that the agenda which the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee wanted was not addressed, and therefore wanted the Public Accounts Committee to look at matters
Mr. Chairman,
that
I'm raising a
benefited
point of order.
the government.
What's the point of order?
The Honourable Chamber, the Honourable Senator is misleading the House, and I do not think it is not deliberate. It is deliberately so at this point. Mr. President, to the best of my knowledge, I just want to be clear, I could be wrong, and I'm subject to correction, but I do not believe that the Honourable Senator sits on the Public Accounts Committee at this time, because to the best of my knowledge, the Honourable Senator joined the Senate after the last meeting of the Public Accounts Committee, and therefore is not privy to any contribution which I made. So that's the first point. And therefore he cannot speak about a matter of which he does not have first-hand knowledge. The second point that I would wish to make, but I will make it during my wrap-up a little later on, is that the agenda of the Public Accounts Committee is in fact set by the members of the Public Accounts Committee. The meetings are called by the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, and I can say without equivocation, Mr. President, in this honourable chamber, that the chamber has a chairman of the Public Accounts Committee who is the leader of the opposition. The honourable member does not sit on that committee so far, Mr. President, because he joined the Senate after the last meeting, and despite this chamber meeting in Management Commission to appoint the honourable member who just spoke to the committee, he has not had the opportunity to sit on the committee, not by my own doing, but by the fact that his own leader has not yet called the meeting to which he can attend, Mr. President, since last year.
Thank you. Please continue, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. President. And for the record, the meetings of the Public Accounts Committee are carried live on the Parliament's
Mr.
website.
President, I rise on a point of order again.
What's the point of order?
The honourable senator is misleading the chamber. The meetings of the Public Accounts Committee are indeed carried ordinarily on the YouTube, but these meetings were held in camera. There is a Hansard record, however, and so these meetings were not broadcast. I intend to speak about those meetings a little later on, but the honourable member has no way of having seen these meetings which were held in camera in this chamber.
Please press on, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. President. But just to give explanation to the question that Senator Nurse would have raised, the Public Accounts Committee needs to have the liberty to focus on its agenda, to bring matters which they believe need to investigate matters in the government. And if the government, which has the majority on the committee, does not allow the chairman to be able to have the leeway to actually set the agenda and bring the matters which need to be discussed, this is where this country will run into issues.
Mr. President, I rise again on a point of order. The honourable senator is misleading the House. It is to my certain knowledge, because I, unlike the honourable member who is speaking, I sit on the committee. I sit on the committee, so I don't speak about second-hand information. Mr. President, the honourable leader of the opposition has indicated that he would wish to discuss a matter which is not before the Parliament. The item that the honourable leader of the opposition is speaking about from the length and breadth of Barbados has not been laid in the Parliament, and therefore the Public Accounts Committee cannot put it on its agenda. And so I believe the honourable member needs to withdraw that statement again, because even though it has been said on other platforms outside of this honourable chamber, here we have to be accurate for the record.
Please wind up, Senator Warren. You have 3 minutes to wind up.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President,
On a point of order, Mr. President, sir.
What's the point of order?
I rise to indicate, sir, that the honourable senator is misleading the chamber. The honourable senator has said that the members have, in essence, again, I'm paraphrasing and using perhaps more elegant language, that the members of the Public Accounts Committee are frustrating the leader by trying to determine what the agenda should be. Mr. President, sir, the members of the Public Accounts Committee are Senator Lisa Cummings, Senator Crystal Drakes, not known to be particularly partial to the Barbados Labour Party government, Senator Nichols, Senator Blackman, Senator Walters, Senator Worrell, who we admit has not been before. These are not people, the government does not have large enough numbers here to frustrate the agenda of the leader of the opposition. So that is a complete misleading of the public and a suggestion that somehow we are attempting to obstruct the workings of an important oversight committee, which we have always supported. And in fact, this construction, which allows it to be led by the leader of the opposition and have a majority of persons which are not members of the government, was the construction of the Barbados Labour Party government during the 1994 to 2008 period, because the then Prime Minister felt that the opposition needed to have this power. So this perception or this view that is being put out today, that we are somehow using this committee to frustrate the opposition, is entirely fake news, sir. And I'm seeing a pattern, sir, where the honorable senator is deliberately putting things into the record, knowing that people will run with them even if they are struck. And that, sir, is an abuse of privilege, of the privilege of the House, sir. And I'm calling on you, please, sir, to ensure that it stops, because this is now an extremely serious matter. It is beyond common error. It is deliberate mischief, sir, and I'm not imputing deliberate wrongdoing. I am basing it on what I'm seeing happen, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Thompson. Please wind up, Senator Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So just wrap up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Just to alert that the Public Accounts Committee is made up of both persons from this chamber and the other place. And the persons on the other place would include MP Sandra Husbands, Marsha Cadell, Corey Lane, Edmund Hinkson, Kerry Simmons, and Colin Jordan. So tell me, after you add those numbers, does the opposition still have the majority, Mr. President?
Wind up.
Mr. President, I would like to use, because I believe I would have had 3 minutes before the long intervention.
Time is actually, sorry, please wrap up. You started at 10:58. It is now midday. So we're two hours over. 2 minutes.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. And in winding up the debate, I think I made the point very clear that Barbados...
On a point of order, sir.
What's the point of order, Senator Thompson?
The honourable senator is misleading the House in suggesting, sir, that the government is attempting to frustrate the workings of the committee. I would wish to draw attention to the chamber that the opposition actually brought to Parliament a bill or resolution to abolish the Public Accounts Committee, sir. That needs to go on the record.
Thank you.
During 2015 to 2016, sir, I just want the record to be accurate.
Thank you very much. Remember that moment. Please wind up, Senator Worrell.
Mr. President, with all of the fluff that was laid in this estimates debate, the critical issues to Barbadians remain that we want to hear the government speak to the realities and the real issues. How are they going to diversify this economy away from tourism? Because all of their budget and their estimates are based on the performance in tourism and not taking into consideration the turmoil in the global economic environment. They're not addressing the issues of cost of living. They're not addressing the realities that affect many people who are concerned about having to go to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and accept a high level of service. So I will appeal to the government that when they take to the floor, that they put aside their arrogance and they have a conversation with the people of Barbados. They campaign on transparency and accountability, and right now the people of Barbados do not have any trust in the government. And with those words, Mr. President, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Worrell. Senator Nichols.
Mr. President, I am grateful for this opportunity to address the House of the Senate in this debate. So I'm mindful of the fact that this is the 8th opportunity that I have been afforded to participate in the debate on the appropriations bill. I had the occasion to do so 4 times between 2003 and 2007. And now, from 2002 to the present, 2022 until the present. So I'm also mindful of the important constitutional duty of this chamber to pass the appropriations bill. And as I reflect on my time in the previous 7 debates, the importance of the independent, professional-minded people who gather in this chamber to deliberate on the government's broad fiscal, economic, and even indeed wider social programs for the ensuing year. I begin, sir, with a sense of humility. I'm humbled by this privilege. Privileged by the honor, but still humbled by the privilege to do so. And I want to, Mr. President, congratulate the Minister and the Ministry of Finance for the presentation of the annual budget in the other place. I do so with beaming pride as a former schoolmate of mine from Commonwealth School. We played in the cadet band together. And that is not because I am choosing one school over the other, because I will come to the leader of government business in the Senate's presentation a little later. She too acquitted herself. But it is important, Mr. President, because ordinarily in the course of one's public life in this chamber, when you get to 4 debates, it ordinarily would signal that you are near to the end of the administration, unless, of course, you hold on beyond the constitutional period, like the last government that we had. And I want, sir, to draw the contrast, because when you listen to these debates, and I have the habit of doing so from the time I was young, having seen the great Tom Adams and the great Dr. Reggie Haynes spar at these debates, and then Professor Owen Arthur and Sandy, Prime Minister Sandyford, and coming down the lines, even my late good friend David Thompson, who joined in these debates in the other place, Mr. President. And Barbadians will want to ask themselves the sobering question, so what is the difference? On Monday, we gathered around the bar after the break, and one of the independent senators made the point, what is the fundamental difference between the operations of the 2 political parties? What is the guiding philosophy between the 2 political parties? Barbadians have made their judgments on that before. Barbadians have made a determination. I mean, when you look at it practically, in practical terms, both parties have won government almost the same amount of times. But we know, sir, from the facts, that in our adult life, every time the Barbados Labour Party has had to come to office, it has to face a crisis. The first time was a crisis created by the sheer lack of development planning and focus by the colonial masters of the day, who only had to plan an economy based on the performance of the sugar industry, and bequeathed to us a legacy of underdevelopment in every social and economic sector on this island. When the Labour Party came to office in 1976, there was a complete crisis in the confidence of this country. And while the mantra was that you wish there was no longer be a day that there will be no cane blaze in Barbados. The true diversification of the Barbadian economy, which began under Grantley Adams with the 1950-51 Hotel Aids Act, which saw Sandy Lane being transformed from a sugar plantation to a hotel. We saw the rapid transformation under the Tom Adams administration with the incentives and the creation of other sectors of economic activity. A sector, Mr. President, like the international business sector, the brainchild of the Barbados Labour Party, which brings over $800 million to the public treasury in this financial year. And when the legislation was laid in the other place, Mr. President, you heard that this was for fancy men in suits coming to Barbados. Indeed, the last DLP administration so ignored the international business sector that they merged international business with international transport. So we created a Ministry of International Business and International Transport just because the word international was in the two of them. And we saw the virtual collapse of the sector. We saw the underperformance of the sector. We saw the flight of swaths of international business corporations. We saw Paul Martin, the former Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, and Prime Minister of Canada, whose large businesses were incorporated as international business companies in Barbados. And he gave up the premiership of that country because he could not withstand the scandal that the blind trust created in favor of his sons was sufficient for the Canadian public to take. But he moved that business, which poured millions of dollars into Barbados Treasury, out of Barbados because of the blacklisting that ensued because of the inertia and inactivity. But this was a sector, Mr. President, that was poo-pooed and never thought of. When you, sir, became the minister responsible for that, I remember very clearly a lot of what the then opposition leader called it, technobabble, was what it was referred to. Now we're hearing it fluff. But when we talk about the diversification of the Barbadian economy, name a business policy other than summer camps and bus fares, free bus fares, that the Democratic Labour Party has brought to the enfranchisement of this country. Name one. Name one sector. Tourism, the backbone of the Barbadian economy. They want us to diversify from tourism, but they haven't told you to do what, you know? Because, Mr. President, I want you to understand that this is a grievance politics being practiced by the DLP and has been traditionally practiced by the DLP. The same way they told Grantley Adams that we do not need a deep water harbor because it would put the lighter men out of work. The same way they told Tom Adams that we don't want a highway. The same way that you get the picture that I'm trying to paint, Mr. President. And they list all of the grievances in this society and jump on a soapbox and this is Len. And I have given up flour and things that look fluffy, so I'm not dealing with you. Not dealing with you today. But, sir, when I say grievance, they've identified things and they sound good. And you make Barbadians get into a frenzy. And we could go on, and I don't want, Mr. President, to be dedicating my time to be defending a lot of that hot air. Because as a father and as a professional in this country, I know what it is to live under administrations that come in after the Barbados Labour Party has laid a sound economic track record for the country and to be ruled by a political party that has a worldview. That everything that was done in Barbados prior to and at around independence was good and perfect, and therefore we don't need to make any other decisions in the future of our country. When a political leader can say, Mr. President, that he will defend the common entrance exam, which we all know was designed in a colonial system. And my learned good friend, Reverend Senator Reverend Morris, spoke about Bishop Parr and Bishop Corrish, but it started out by Bishop Michigan in the 1846 reports on education in Barbados to control random middle-class ambition. That was the purpose of the design of the Victorian education system that we still have today. When you meet people, the first thing they ask you, where do you go to school? Who's your father and your mother? I have to disappoint them, like Senator comes to tell them, my parents are ordinary Bajans. I didn't go to Harrison College. And they start to wonder, well, how you get so far in this society? A class system. That when we start to unravel the reasons why we have the challenges we have in Barbados, it is all rooted in the economic and social class structure of the society that we have in a post-independence era. And we have to unpack these debates. But the grievance politics, Mr. President, will not get us far. I want to congratulate Minister Strawn for his brilliant presentation. I know people will feel that they didn't cover everything and that a budget can't do it. But I judge, Mr. President, the policy of the government, which I support, on the basis of some tried-tested measures of public policy and good public policy. Sir, there's a global realignment occurring. There is a global realignment, and this is not anything to foo-foo. And this budget has sought to ensure that the country can withstand the level of readjustments that are occurring at the same time as maintaining the social order, the quality of life in the country. Last week, a block of ice broke off the Arctic, larger than Manhattan. In a country where we are a limestone settlement, one of 3 in the Western Hemisphere, that has serious implications for our groundwater supply. The salt penetration into the aquifers as a result of climate change. We could shout about the QEH and all the roads and the schools and all these things. But if we cannot shore up our coastlines, our near-shore environment, and our marine environment as a result of a climate change phenomenon that is being ignored by the Western powers and the European powers that want to ensure that the warming of the climate can allow them to access the hydrocarbon reserves in the Arctic and those places. And that is not being alarmist, that is a fact. Because the President of the United States of America says, drill, baby, drill. And therefore, Alaska and the Arctic and now Greenland can be the basis for the techno-oligarchs who now stand proudly in the White House, commanding the President of the United States of America to do as they demand. Drill, baby, drill. Barbados has to suffer the consequences of that. So when Barbados has to choose, Barbadians have to choose between a political administration that brings climate resilience into the core of the budgetary proposals and what we have to do as to realign our strategies. We can hear the discussion coming from the other side. There is a decisive difference. Mr. President, we are witnessing the end of the current global capitalist system, in my view. And I say that because I had the benefit as a student to study Andre Gunder Frank, Emmanuel Wallerstein, Herbert Duke, world system theory. This capitalism cycle is coming to an end. The settlement that occurred in the mid-20th century after World War II has now exhausted is bursting at the seams, and we are seeing a resort to inward economic and military interests by the great powers of the world. We are seeing the rise of the billionaire class who have doubled their wealth since 2020. And their interests have now become the interests of the most powerful nations in the world. We are now, Mr. President, the slaves to the technology owned by the Bezoses, the Zuckerbergs, and the Musks of the world. We have to log in. And we are now, sir, competing in a world where we are not using our labor and our capital to build goods and services, but even the people who manufacture have to forfeit 40% of the cost of the good to sell it on international platforms like Amazon. You imagine that? So the surplus is not going back into the owner of capital who has invested. That system of economic organization of the world is now coming to an end, Mr. President. And the country has to understand that Barbados cannot stand splendidly in isolation. And when I began this journey in public life, Mr. President, I have started to look at certain things which will guide my perspective on how I engage in these matters. And I often go by a quotation, and if you speak to me on social media or in WhatsApp, my message is simple. The world is what it is. And men who are nothing and who allow themselves to be nothing have no place in it. Those are the words of V.S. Naipaul in the introduction of his book, A Bend in the River, describing the tragic journey of the human circumstance. The world is what it is. Men who are nothing and who allow themselves to be nothing have no place in it. And I want, sir, during the course of the rest of my presentation, to rise above the partisan rancor and the divisive politics and the politics of grievance that all of a sudden this little place is now tearing apart and a tyranny is reigning and a dystopian future awaits us with not a care for the ever clear and present dangers that are ahead. Mr. President, the Bible tells us that when the Israelites were gathering the troops to fight the Midianites, the Lord told them, that army too large. And if you go and get beat, the people can blame the Lord. Reduce the army, but how? Find soldiers who have their gaze on the horizon, and those who went and drank from the river without looking down to make sure that they kept their eyes on the enemies around were sent back home. Mr. President, I say to the people of Barbados, this government will drink from the river, but we will keep our eyes, gaze, and fix on the international, regional, and local environmental considerations that we have to face. And that is what motivates the budget. It will not titillate those whose minds and gazes are fixed on only a nativist internal reordering of the political structure in Barbados. They have clear and present dangers. Mr. President, climate resilience has to be built in to what the government does. And the clear contrast between the Barbados Labour Party and the Democratic Labour Party is after Hurricane Beryl, the opposition leader told the country that we should have moved all the boats in Barbados to St. Thomas and put them on the highlands so that the boats will not be affected by a storm. Mr. President, this was a Category 4 hurricane. Sorry, this was a tropical depression that moved into a Category 1 hurricane, into a Category 3 in less than 24 hours. The intensification of the storm was historically high. The speed at which it developed. Tropical wave in the Atlantic, we're keeping our eyes on it. Category 1 in a hurry, and mercifully, it went between Barbados and the northern grenadines. That should signal a warning. What should the government do, Mr. President? And we understand the impact on the South Coast. Imagine if that had a more direct path in to Barbados. So what does the government do? We could sit down and criticize the climate resilient measures in the budget. What does a responsible government do? St. Thomas don't want no deadwood, but you want to carry all the boats up to St. Thomas. Like if that is a practical solution to a real problem. That is the difference between the two political parties that govern the country, Mr. President. Mr. President, again, there's an African proverb that I want to reintroduce into this chamber that guides my reflections. And it says that in Africa, every morning, a lion wakes up and knows that it must run faster than the slowest gazelle. If not, it will starve. Every morning, the gazelle wakes up and knows it must run faster than the fastest lion. If not, it will be eaten. It matters not whether you are a lion or you're a gazelle. But in Africa, every morning when the sun rises, you must run fast. That is the world that we are in. That is the perspective that I am offering to you, Mr. President, and those who can hear, that if you are engaged in public policy formulation and critique in this era, that you must adopt. Barbados cannot stand splendidly in isolation. And when the divisive politics of discontent and of grievance is mounted by the other side, they will tell you things like the Prime Minister always traveling. But I am seeing international leaders coming to this country to engage with Barbados. I am seeing the Prime Minister of the largest and most popular, when I say largest, I mean in terms of most populous nation in the world, India, coming directly to engage with Barbados. I'm seeing the African continent responding to Barbados, championing causes, joining in chorus with the Republic of Barbados on important global issues. The Prime Minister of Barbados has received Kofi Annan Award, the Nelson Mandela Award, United Nations Award for Global Excellence. If you go on the United Nations website, Mr. President, you will see that the global leader in relation to climate and bringing a difference in terms of the restructuring of global financial architecture. When this government, Mr. President, negotiates climate debt swap, the Green Climate Initiative, debt for nature swaps, and the debt, I can't remember the name of the term now, but in terms of what you get in relief, the debt relief clauses, 20% of our GDP unlocks $2 billion. If we get hit by a major catastrophe, it unlocks $2 billion. We don't have to pay loans for 2 years. That is because we understand the realities, the world is what it is. And men who are nothing and who allow themselves to be nothing have no place in it. The decisive difference between the two political parties, Mr. President. The decisive difference. That African proverb between the lion and gazelle, Mr. President, emphasizes the constant struggle for survival. And as a small island state, we want not to see ourselves limited by the inhibition of the small geographical size of our landmass. We are a large ocean state. We are a large ocean state, and therefore we have to see ourselves as showing the world our capacity to function in a new environment in which we see ourselves differently. Mr. President, that African proverb highlights the need for continuous effort and action regardless of one's position or circumstances. Because the lion and the gazelle has to run fast. That African problem, Mr. President, highlights the importance of being proactive and never become complacent. The environment changes. And they might not want to hear it, but the environment is changing around us, Mr. President. So that, Mr. President, I have heard a number of things in the debate. Can't respond to all of them. But we are accused as an administration as taking in more taxes than any other administration in the history of the country. As if to say that that is something wrong. Mr. President, you will not be surprised to know that every administration in the history of Barbados has taken in more taxes than the previous administration. That is, therefore, in itself not a fact of note. But when you hear the opposition members, particularly the ones in this chamber quoting statistics, I always remember what a senator in this chamber, a former senator in this chamber, when he taught me statistics at the university, that is Senator Tyrone Barker, always used to tell us. Statistics, he was quoting George Bernard Shaw. Statistics are like a woman in a bikini. What they reveal is interesting, but what they conceal is vital. So when you tell the country that we have taken in more taxes than the last administration, you're revealing that the last administration also took in more taxes in 10 years than it went after administration in 14. But you don't tell the country that the size of the Barbadian economy under the Van der Steur administration was smaller than the size of the economy under Tom Adams. So we are not getting into real economic assessments and forecasting. When you tell the country that we are taking in all these taxes and the increases in taxes, tell the country that this administration reduced income tax. Tell the country that this administration reduced land tax and corporation taxes and remove the inequitous national social responsibility levy that could not get Barbados out of the fiscal challenges that led us to the door of the IMF. And when they speak, they must say to the country, no one has explained, when they called elections in May 2018, they were telling the country that the debt to GDP ratio was 137% of GDP. We came to office and found that that was not so. We had a Eurobonds payment due weeks after that the country didn't know. We were at the brink of devaluation. And the first time we had to default on the international loan, not because of anything that we did, because for the last 6 or 7 years, the central bank was forbidden to publish the economic reports to the country. And we only got that information from the IMF assessments, not from the central bank reports. There was no tyranny then. There was no tyranny. And everybody in Barbados is still silent, but I understand Barbadian people. That is what happened to them for the last 2 election cycles, because they forbade the central bank from publishing financial reports.
On a point of order, Mr. President,
Yes,
that Senator Nichols is misleading the House. At no point in time, if you go on the central bank website, you will see all of the financial reports on a quarterly basis during the period of between 2008 to 2018, when the Democratic Labour Party was in office. So Senator Nichols is misleading the chamber with that statement that we forbid the central bank from publishing economic reports.
Thank you, Senator Worrell. Please proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't think the senator is listening. I said it forbidden from publishing. The fact that they're there now doesn't mean that you did not forbid them from publishing. Exactly. The governor of the central bank came out with a different analysis and said this is not the report that in traditional form Barbadians can remember. And the reports are there, Mr. President. I happen to know that they fired the central bank governor because he's telling them, well, we're going to stop printing money now. I remember having told the IMF that we would stop putting pressure on the central bank governor and publish for the IMF consultation an amendment to the Central Bank Act. They turned around 2 months later and fired the central bank governor because he stopped them from printing money and running up the deficit to the Central Bank of Barbados and putting pressure on the foreign reserves. That's when they went to the National Insurance Fund to fund not developments like the schools that Senator Walters wants and the hospital that Senator Worrell asked for, but to pay public service salaries, Mr. President. In those IMF reports, the $1 billion write-off for NIS, you know what that was? That was the government of Barbados under the DLP spending the national insurance money to pay salaries. That there is nothing to show for it. And that is a fact. Tell the country where we didn't come and lick out $1 billion of the national insurance. We had to restructure all of Barbados' debt and write off all of what we had to write off in respect of own to creditors. Everybody had to take a haircut. The $1 billion was not of our manufacture. But they come standing on a soapbox to tell people, as I heard in here, that we're going to make people retire now at a later age. Now, let us be real, Mr. President. You have a shrinking population. You have an aging population. So that the rate at which people retire is happening faster. So it means that you have more people living longer, having to get Social Security benefits that are being replenished by a smaller working population. And as a responsible government, there are three options. You either decrease the benefits to the people who get them or when they retire, you increase the contributions to the people who are by the people who are working, or you defer the benefits. Three options. I haven't heard them come up with any, but we are wicked by choosing the one that is more palatable. Because the truth is that if Barbadians are living now well into the 80s and 90s, more of them I should say, it means that your retirement age, if it goes up by 2 or 3 years, is not going to interfere a lot. I know that has made people uneasy because there's a mental adjustment. You have to prepare now to work a little longer. But there's nothing that stops someone from retiring early. It's just that you will not be able to draw the maximum if you do not have the required years in. But the decision was not done out of spite, sir. The government took the decision that we will not reduce the coverage of benefits that Barbadians get from the NS. The government took the decision that we will not increase the contributions of the working people to pay for that adjustment. That is the decision that we made, defer. If they come up with a better option, and they were in all the meetings that we had in this chamber where the experts, the actuaries came and told us what we had to do. Sir, this economic transformation is continuing, is on the way, it's continuing. The recovery, sir, is behind us. It is time to deal with the transformation of the Barbadian economy. We have had, sir, the move from junk to 15 quarters of economic growth. We have seen, sir, the Bridgetown Initiative 3.0 being embraced by countries all over the world. Barbados has become a mighty voice for climate justice. If you go on UN, Google UN climate change, climate resilience, and they have on the front page, Barbados has become a mighty voice for climate justice. We're one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change in the world. This budget deals with climate adaptability and resilience. We face a debt crisis, which makes investing in climate resilience more difficult. And these measures in the budget address these concerns. And just as Sir Louis Tell used to say to us before, if you pave all the roads in the country and they're not leading anywhere, you're just going around in circles. We have to deal with our climate resilience. We have to take it on as our own mission, because we are not going to get any ease from the man with the drill, baby, drill philosophy. And the countries in the world that want to empower those who have doubled their wealth since 2020. The Barbados Initiative, the British Initiative 3.0, represents a radical rethinking of the global financial system, speaking to debt relief and new lending and private sector investments. The minister in the Ministry of Finance in the other place, Mr. President, spoke to the Barbados investment plan. And I heard Senator Malilu, and I want to assure him, sir, that the Barbados investment plan, which was published by the government last year, speaks to raising $26 billion to fend off, the Barbados investment plan, sir, speaks to raising about $20 or so billion over the next 10 years to deal with the investment infrastructural needs of the country. Now, let me be very, very clear. The government finances its operation by taxes, revenue, or by investment coming into the country from which you can get downstream revenue, or from borrowing. You don't want more taxes. We have a small population that is working relative to the size of the economy that we have and the social services that we have to provide. So we can't tax it out of Barbadians. But as Oinaka told us, if a certain percentage of your GDP is not being generated by investment, then there will be a decline in the social services in the country. So our approach has been consistent. Yes, we wanted to see a day when there is no longer a cane blade in Barbados. But, Mr. President, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? The Afromix Bank Trade Center is now popular on the minds that we give away the land. When the Right Excellent Aaron Barrow, Sir Frank Worrell, and others got on to that plane, flew around Barbados, they were looking for land to give to the University of the West Indies as an investment in the people of Barbados. That site was chosen. The university didn't buy it. It was an investment in the people of Barbados. And when Oinaka saw the importance of the university to the Barbadian economy and society, he told them to go down the hill by the Lazaretta and get all that land and build out the campus. And I want to say to Senator Walters, tell the people of St. Michael Northwest that when they look up the hill at the university, right? They vote for you either. Tell the people of St. Michael Northwest how those persons in Oxnards and husbands and one state have been able to take those Venezuelan houses and build them into large bungalows out of rental accommodation that they now don't live in, and have been able to invest in their children and their futures through the University of the West Indies and the contribution to the Barbados economy. Tell them that Freehill and Gainsbury and those areas in Black Rock can also benefit from you. But you know what they did? They tried their best to kill the campus. Killing it. We'll come to that another time. When the government wanted to have a center for Caribbean Finance, the Caribbean Development Bank. Land. Barbados cannot stand splendidly in isolation. The Africa, I heard the leader of the opposition say in an interview that he never heard about them yet. Like this is some knit and trade, cottage industry that come and hoodwink the government of Barbados. Tell the people the truth. They're building $180 million in facilities. $180 million. They're headquartering the Afromix Bank in Barbados. And we have a headquarters agreement with them. The government is already providing accommodation for them in the agreement. They're the headquarters for a large African bank, and we want to talk about how we are in solidarity with our African brothers, and that is so important that support the black man and that kind of thing. There's a lot of talk and hot air and fluff. But you are trying to whip up a grievance that somebody coming to take the Barbadian land. Somebody taking it there and we get tricked. Mr. President, let us be real. This bank is currently on the trajectory to move to $2.5 billion in economic trade activity in the region. Barbados is the headquarters for that. This facility, sir, will be a flagship for offices, a technology incubation hub. When you talk about not diversifying the Barbadian economy, you have a multi-billion-dollar financial institution coming to bring a technology incubation hub in Barbados, a trade center. And they're looking at Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America. In the world in which we now heard the president suspend all U.S. aid to these places. Friends of all, satellites of none. So we are not friends with Africa. We're not friends with Asia. We're not friends with the Arab countries. We're not friends with the countries on the subcontinent. This investment in Barbados is reinventing the infamous Mill Passage in a way that we have never thought before. The economic relationship between Africa and the Caribbean and the rest of the world. They have spent, Mr. President, or financially to say, a $200 million hospital in Grenada. This is Afromix Bank. $150 million in roads infrastructure in the Bahamas. $1 billion in local content financing, in a local content financing facility for Guyana's oil and their pipelines. This is a relationship of equal partners that are interested in the advancement and the development of Caribbean people. They are partnering, sir, with all of the governors of the central bank right now with a payment system for the Caribbean so that we don't have to be paying one another for goods and services in U.S. currency, in foreign coin, that we can be able to trade with one another without interfering with a balance of payments. They're bringing their technical capacity to facilitate the establishment of a Caribbean Exim Bank because they have done it, and that is what is coming to Barbados. But just, sir, like how they get and frighten Barbados and tell them the cadavers, don't bring the medical school here. You go down to Lansopine in Grenada and see the transformation of the southern coast of Grenada into a university town, which is a large part of the GDP of that country. But we were told in the 1980s that having a medical school in Barbados, the people bringing in cadavers and Dracula, importing Dracula, don't have that here. And that was the grievance politics and get Barbados excited of it because they have not learned, sir, or forgot anything since 1966. Their worldview is that what happened when Barrow was prime minister, we should keep Barbados, and that's why you had to suffer through Stuart. We have the same thing coming again. Anything that changes that trajectory, and you know what that is, sir? That is what Evelyn Toffler called future shock. A psychological state where the pace of change is happening so fast that you go into a shell. And we have to keep the country stagnant where it is. That is the decisive difference between the Barbados Labour Party and the DLP, sir. We don't see the future shock. We see the world is what it is. We understand that men and women who are nothing and who allow themselves to be nothing have no place in it. We see Barbados, Mr. President, sir, as a place where we engage in the international environment. We run with the hares and hunt with the hounds. We run as fast as the lion, we run as fast as the gazelle because the circumstances can change. Mr. President, the food, the loan that we got from the Afromix Bank, the Cricket World Cup. Nearly a word was said, sir, by the opposition. The economic impact assessment of Cricket World Cup was $428 million impact on the Barbadian economy. I want to get it clear. This is not saying that we earned $428 million, but the impact, economic impact of the World Cup. And this is not done by the Barbados Labour Party or any government consultant. This is done and published by the International Cricket Council. The ICC, through an expert economic consultancy that measures all global sport tournaments in the world. And sir, I am proud to report to this chamber that economic impact assessment of the ICC Men's T20 World Cup 2024 was published in December. Generated a total economic impact of $428.4 million US dollars for the Barbados economy. The economic forecasting and modeling is set out in the detailed report. They use the economic multiplier, which determines the secondary and incremental spends within the economy, as a key driver of the impact. Sir, I want to say this to you. Barbados was only outpaced by the United States of America. The impact to the American economy was $618.4 million. But you know what? That World Cup in the United States took place in Texas, Florida, and New York. 3 different states. So the economic impact, the total economic impact that Barbados had was a 26% share of the total generated economic revenue. The total share of the total value generated by the World Cup, not the revenue, not the revenue. So when we break down these figures, sir, we see that there were, in Barbados, 41% of the people who came for World Cup were first-time visitors. 29% of the people who came for World Cup came more than 5 times. Hosting the World Cup had a positive impact on the image of Barbados. 90% of the people who came felt that hosting the World Cup had a positive impact on Barbados' image. 86% would recommend coming to friends and family. 83% of the World Cup helped to promote Barbados as a sports destination. 71% of the attendees are likely to return, and 67% of them felt that the atmosphere was better than any other location. And when you go into the details, Mr. President, I know time is winding up. 91% of our visitors for the World Cup stayed overnight, higher than any other destination. Sir, the largest proportion of them stayed for 5 nights or more, higher than any other destination. And the largest were groups of 3, the next largest were groups of 5 people. Sir, there were the attendees at the World Cup. This is the outturn numbers. 14,092 domestic ticket sales, 38,068 international, players and staff, 661, media broadcasting, 834 persons, the VIP sponsors and guests, 7,916. The technical officials and organizing staff, 3,155. Sir, when we rebuilt the modern Kensington Oval, we understood that it would give Barbados the capacity to host an international World Cup in cricket. We did not host 3 finals, we actually hosted 4. Because I count the women's final in 2010 as separate from the men's final in 2010. The Democratic Labour Party, when they were in office, had the opportunity, sir, to host the Women's World Cup, and they said no. No. That they couldn't find the $1 million to secure the bid. We were so broke that the government cannot find $1 million. In a tournament at which the West Indies were defending women's champions, with Hayley Matthews and Deandra Dotting, Shakira Selman, Barbadian women, from the rural heart of Barbados, that could inspire young people. They talk about diversifying the economy. The leader of the opposition says, this money he go down to Spartan, he see a new bat or ball. Now, that scares me, sir. It scares me that if he felt that we could measure the success of World Cup by going to Spartan, his famous, what he said words, my beloved Spartan, that's what he said. I don't want not the Spartans, but Spartan get demoted. They get demoted, man. And it is not because of anything that is done by anybody. That is competition, and that's unfortunate. But I'll tell you the difference. Empire now in the under-13 competition, unbeaten. They're unbeaten in the under-16. And if you go around Barbados on a weekend, the dystopian outlook of Barbados is not seen. You see parents, grandparents. We went to the finals, and I had to speak at a university guest lecture on Sunday evening. I had to leave and then go there and then come back. Hundreds of people, ball by ball commentary, people living in festive atmosphere, young people in a laudable endeavor, our national pastime, cricket. So when Senator Reid, the Honourable Minister of MISS, speaks about cricket incubation hub, harnessing that Barbadian talent to take us to the next level, to unlock the pathways and potentials for young Hayley Matthews and Craig Braffitts to come out of our environment. And I say to the Honourable Leader of the Senate, I went to the St. Michael School. I asked people who are the greatest Barbadians that ever went to that school. I know Nita Barr is first on the list. But if you tell me a greater Barbadian coming from St. Michael School other than Jason Holder, an accomplished, world-renowned #1 all-rounder who is a millionaire. I hope I'm not embarrassing him, but I'm doing that to praise the exploits of our young men and women in the field of cricket. Cricket is Barbados and Barbados is cricket. And Senator Walters, when we were here approving the loan from the Afromix Bank to take Barbados' facility that has lost its shine because the technological improvements since 2007 have now made the facility almost obsolete. This is the difference. If you want to see more bats and balls in the hands of people, give them a DLP government. Mr. President, if you want to see a cricketing industry, where not Barbadians are not only playing for the West Indies, but as a friend of mine says, if you see England in the ICC Champions Trophy, 3 Bajans on that team. 3. The captain of Canada in the World Cup, Bajan. Captain of the United States of America, Bajans, Foundation School. Huh? One. A pivot man. Right? And sir, I want to say this. That is the decisive difference. Grievance politics, listing all the social and economic ills in the society and keeping it at the hands of the government so you can get in office and do nothing. And then say, well, look, the economic circumstances are difficult, the international circumstances are difficult. We can't do nothing. That's what they did under Sandiford and Stewart. And that's what they're prepared to do again. Sir, I want to say, and I just checking with time, sir.
You have 3 minutes, right?
Sir, I wanted to.
3 minutes to wind up.
I wanted to go into labor, sir. Sir, and Mayor, the Nichols and Lashley clan will be gathering in Barbados. Already, we have over 75 people coming into the country, confirmed. Some of them who have not been here in over 30 years. Some of them who only come for funerals or the occasional wedding. I happen to know that Senator Monroe Knight is part of that clan because in the investigation of how the family spreads, I had to tell her that so-and-so is your father, this is your grandmother, yeah, you family to me. Because we'll be gathering. We didn't know we were related. Yes, hooray. When the DLP had the Barbados 50th anniversary of independence to celebrate, you know what they did? They did 2 things. They built a monument in the middle of the garrison at the boy don't get to, and they bring some parachute men from Ghana to land at the garrison at the parade. One land in the Duck Street and Bonnets, one land at Pebbles, and one land in the car park at the hospital. For our 50th anniversary. And 23 men from the Bayland get national awards for helping remove furniture from a burning house. That was how we celebrated our, y'all remember that, the 50th anniversary? That is the decisive difference.
$8 million was paid. Over $8 million.
And nobody goes to that monstrosity in the middle of the hot sun in the garrison. Still there. But it was part of the 10 glorious years. Sir, there is a decisive difference. And as I close, I want to commend to this house that the world is what it is. Men and women who do nothing and who allow themselves to be nothing. Sir, they have no place in it. I'm obliged to you.
Senator Maynard, please.
Thank you.
Senator, Mr. Maynard.
Thank you, Madam. Ma'am, I rise to speak on what will probably be my last contribution for an appropriations bill. If the terms and conditions under which I was appointed follow the path that's written down. Let me first, sir, acknowledge my former colleague in this chamber, Senator Crystal Haynes, who sat on the opposite side of the table, and while we had our differences of opinions, I enjoyed her time in this chamber. I shall miss, apart from missing her contributions, I shall miss her fashion. But I thought, sir, sorry, ma'am, I thought, ma'am, that I should say some things and do it with a quote from a book written by Sir Frederick Smith called Dreaming a Nation. And with your permission, ma'am, I shall like to read it.
Permission granted. Please copy the particular quotation so that we can have it as a document. Yes.
It's a quotation by Chinua Achebe. It says, there's a great proverb that until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And that did not come to me until much later. Once I realized that, I had to be a writer. I had to be that historian. It is not one man's job. It is not one person's job. But it is something we have to do so that the history of the hunt will also reflect the agony, the travail, the bravery, even of the lions. I would like to welcome Senator Jonathan Reed, even in his absence, and I hope that his time in this chamber will be productive and shall bring great results. I wish to turn, ma'am, to an area for me that is out of my zone, and it will begin like this. Yesterday, there was reference, probably off when the Senate was closed, to a statement allegedly made by the leader of the opposition in the other place. And I had my own interpretation of that statement. And the statement related to children who failed the common entrance and what it probably said about their past performance. If I take it in its pure sense and interpret it in a positive way, it speaks the truth as to what happens with the common entrance. And it's not an exam that I have ever supported. I have no shame in saying that. What it raises is the question about the adequacy of screening of our children in this country. I will stop here. This point continues on.
Thank you, Deputy President. Please continue, Senator Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sir, there's no question that the results of the common entrance exam are better for private schools than for public schools. And the private schools are more likely to be filled with children from the upper socioeconomic bracket, those who can pay. But sir, what we need in this country is adequate funding. If we are going to have change in education as proposed, we need to have adequate screening of all of our newborns. And while there are some systems already in place, there needs to be universal screening of our school-age children, and it has to be done in a systematic way. We already have in the QEH screening for congenital hearing loss of all newborn children. And even with that screening, sometimes newborn babies fall through the cracks because of equipment failures, staff shortages. So sometimes you have a cohort of children that haven't been screened, and unfortunately, 4 years on, you find a child that has congenital hearing loss, and you've missed it. Or a child has had treatment for a life-threatening disorder, and unfortunately, the medical treatment has caused a complication and you've missed it. And that child ends up in school and discovered in school to have a hearing loss. And might end up having large sums of money spent for cochlear implantation. So the ophthalmic screening is thankfully on the way, and the minister, I suppose, will speak to this. But the screening of well children, once upon a time, only the children who had problems in school were referred for ophthalmic screening. But in more recent times, starting last year, the Ministry of Health, along with the Ministry of Education, started a program where children aged 3 to 5 were all screened in 4 polyclinics. And I think that's a wonderful change. But we have to fund it and keep it going. The screening also is supposed to include children entering secondary school. But apart from screening, we have to be in a position to correct the visual deficiencies that occur. Now, from a pediatric point of view, the pediatricians cry out for the resources to screen the children who present or who might have things like attention deficit disorder, dyslexia, and dysgraphia. You don't recognize words. You can't read properly. And that screening is limited and restricted by the number of professionals, mainly psychologists, that we have available. And I would hope that the Ministry of Health and Education together would be looking to expand those areas so that all children who are entering secondary schools would already have been screened at least once. So some of the problems that we grapple with in the later teens would have been identified very early on, and remedial work with these children would have already taken place. It is not enough to depend on the NGOs to do the important screening. We recently had a program initiated by Rotary Barbados, I think it is, and they've done a wonderful job where they have been going to the schools and screening children. But that screening has to become a normal annual activity. Now, the people of this country pay about $75 million annually in the health levy. And that health levy is passed on to the QEH. But the QEH cannot do adequate screening because it lacks the staff. And the problem with the staff recruitment is not a problem for the minister. The posts have been created, but we seem to be unable to attract the people who will do the professional qualification and become, hopefully, those who will be doing the screening. The government has gone as far, I think, as offering national development scholarships in the area, and have had no takers. So maybe the government should pay someone to put on one of the electric buses, wrap it in the ads like other people do, to encourage parents to screen their children, to bring them for screening, sir, and to encourage the young people who want to have jobs to take up the scholarships and do the important work and probably make a very good living. And the fast food outlets, I will not call any names, maybe they can run some of the ads, because almost every Bajan at some point in time eats some fast food, and you can see it on the boxes. I am not, sir, I'm not politically inclined. I will not get involved with such things. Now, I want to say a little bit about tertiary education. Sir, on Saturday, I had the privilege, along with my colleague, Senator Cummins and Senator Blackman, to attend a function, what should have been the highlight of at the University of West Indies. And it was for the installation of the 7th Chancellor of the University. It was a major event, sir. And it, in some ways, spoke to support some of the views that were echoed in this chamber about education and what it really means. The 7th Chancellor, the Most Honorable Dr. G.D. Miller, did not attend one of the older secondary schools. He attended a school that no longer exists on paper. It was called Industry High. 300 students. But his exposure and his resilience and all the support he had assisted him to become a champion of business. And he's now the Chancellor. And he, sir, is listed among names like Sir George Allen as Chancellor, Princess Alice, Sheila Ramphal, and a few others. The last Chancellor, Robert Bermudez. But the university, as we see it, is not Cave Hill campus at all. This tertiary educational institution is a massive facility, sir. And I decided to bring with me the installation booklet. And I, with your permission again, want to read a few things about our university, our alma mater. It's been established in the Caribbean for over 75 years. And it has nearly 50,000 students. 50,000 students and 5 campuses. I don't know how many universities have 50,000 students on their roll. It offers over 1,000 certificate, diploma, undergraduate and postgraduate degree options. That's remarkable in this little Caribbean. And it has a network of over 250,000 alumni. And it's had 25 persons rise to be head of states and 3 Nobel laureates. 3 Nobel laureates in our small, relatively small population. That's a serious achievement. It's ranked in the top 5% of universities in the world, or supposedly Little University of West Indies. And thirdly, the ceremony culminated with a song. And those of you who are musically inclined will want to hear that the song was sung by Sam Cooke. But on this occasion, it was sung by a teenager. I think her name was Cherise Goddard. And she sang it with enthusiasm and energy, and I felt she sang it with real belief that change is going to come, that our universities, sir, will not stagnate. And she was diminutive, but absolutely powerful and incredible. My jacket was off my skin because all my hair was standing up. She was powerful. And I felt that whoever chose that song for the occasion did the right thing. I shall not forget it. But sir, our university is a global university. It is not a Caribbean university. We who have benefited probably do not give back enough. And that probably includes me. There's some who've never given at all. But we don't give enough. And we need to do like what happens in other places where the alumni really seriously contribute to the university. And we need to educate the young people that the days of having a degree where you feel that you have to do it in one place and all your experience will be in that one place are over. That there's a move to have tertiary education where you can be in several places. You can do one part of your degree, and UW has such connections. One part of your degree can be done in Barbados, the other part can be done in Jamaica, maybe one part in Canada, and you have a joint degree. And it opens one's eyes and experiences. So I believe that with Mr. Miller's experience and the evidence that he's produced of what he's capable of, having built out Sagicor as a global company, change will come. I feel a little bit unfortunate that I'm this age where I couldn't be at university at this time to be part of the new change. But I expect in my latter years to see a lot happen with our university. And I hope that all of us will continue to give. Sir, I want to say a little bit about water. That precious thing in this country and everywhere. Sir, we heard in the budget that the government intends to give, I call it a rebate to people in the north that's connected to the brown water that they're receiving. And I think that, I suppose it will serve its purpose. But more importantly, the government is making a serious effort in the mains replacement program to remove the cause, the immediate cause of the problem, the rusty mains. But what I am hoping, sir, is that the government will also, through the BWA, and I believe that they're doing it, do some thorough analysis of the water and make sure that there is no public health issue associated with the water. I say that because 90% of our mains are still cast iron mains. And I worry that the problem that happened in the north could happen anywhere else in Barbados. And then you have a series of major problems. So whatever we find, if it's something that is correctable and we genuinely find the cause of it, we can deal with it. Now, sir, I'm always worried about means replacement programs and our ability to execute them in a timely fashion. And I hope that the management and the board in the BWA will make sure that what is being done in the north is done in a timely fashion. Because the last thing we want is a long, drawn-out process that is incomplete and the problem still exists. Now, the BWA, I will give you this one in an interesting way. I was driving one night and a truck came up. I think it was driving along Applewaite near the junction, and the truck came down, came around the corner, almost broadside, and I had to really pull hard into the left. And I almost went into a hole. And I found out next day when I passed again that it was because the BWA had dug holes beside the road and they were connecting shut-off valves. So I, being inquisitive, parked the vehicle, got out and looked to see what they were doing. And to my pleasure, I found out that they were putting in shut-off valves and diverter valves so they could shut off areas where the water could be closed off for a short segment, and other people could continue to have water if there's a burst main. But I also believe that because of how complicated it looked, with sampling valves in it, that they should be able to monitor for leakages. So one day I would like to believe that there'll be a control room somewhere in the BWA, and people will be able to tell when the mains burst in the middle of a cane field crossing the cane field in St. George. I hope, sir, that when we do all of this infrastructure, that we follow through with what we can really do with it, and it is beneficial to all. Government has done the right thing by reducing the subsidy that farmers pay for BWA water. It, in some ways, sir, I will use this term, level the playing field. It means that if your major input into your crops is cut by almost 50%, you really shouldn't complain about the cost of it anymore. So I would like to see that for the consumer of these crops, the price will change. Because the main complaint has been we pay too much for water, and government has seen it fit to lower the cost of water. There are others, Mr. President, who continue to have free water, but that's a different discussion for another time. Sir, what I'm concerned about with regard to water relates to new development, new plan development. And Senator Nichols, proudly and correctly so, spoke about the new development that will happen around the QEH, specifically building on Gemmis Lane, the Pierhead project. He didn't speak of the Pierhead project, I don't think, but also the new hotel further down Bay Street. All of these facilities will consume large quantities of water and produce large quantities of sewage. At the end of the day, they will use potable water in their operations. The water has to come from somewhere. The estimate is that we've already reached 100% usage of our groundwater supply, and any further development will have to depend on desalinated water. And sir, what the governments, I say governments on purpose, have not done is done the public education with regard to water usage, both water conservation and, sir, secondary water usage. They have sat quietly and allowed those who will speak ill of secondary water usage to have the front of the platform. And I call upon the government to get up off the chairs and get out there and do the public education. We go to cities that we come back and talk about, and we drink recycled water. 2 people just returned from space. Do you think that the BW is sending water to them every day? They just came back after 9 months. What do you think they were drinking? You think that they were selling bottled water to them? The government needs to do the public education. Do not allow those who continue to speak ill about it for understanding to be at the front of the platform. We have to be realistic. Now, the other matter, sir, relates to the cost of water. 75% of the cost of producing potable water is energy. And governments, when they negotiate, we are speaking about a country that is proud of its green energy push. Government, when it negotiates its contracts for desalination, has to put energy at the front, and the cost of green energy has to be in the equation, and it has to be used to determine the cost of the water per cubic meter. It is not enough to just come up with a number out of a hat and we accept it. Because at the end of the day, the consumer has to pay, and no matter how many incentives you give to individuals to have a potable water tank, it still has to be filled with potable water. And you still have to clean it, and you still have to buy a pump, and all the other things. So Senator Malu this morning spoke about the potable water tank, and there are aspects of it that I'm not sure we've got them right, because I happen to have a potable water tank at home. I only have 400 gallons, but I have 2 tanks because I believe that the water has to circulate, and I do not want a large tank that has stagnant water in it. If any of you has the courage to empty your tank and go into the tank to clean it, you'll be surprised at the amount of sludge you will find. And that sludge is not Jell-O, sir. That sludge is not Jell-O. So there will be costs associated with having tanks. There will be costs of filters that are replaceable. Yes, there will be lots of employment generated if people clean the tanks and look after them. And the tanks only have a limited lifespan, the plastic tanks. So it's one thing giving a concession for a tank now, but 10 years, 12 years down the line, when the tank leaks, and you have to replace it, and the pump goes, because the pump runs all the time. As long as you have continuous flow, rather than a reserve tank, the pumps will die. So there'll be ongoing costs. There will also be greater demand on the grid, because every time you turn on your tap and your pressurized valve pressure falls, the pump will cut in and it will burn electricity. So while I am told that in the case of a hurricane and there's a problem with energy supply from the grid, you can have potable water in storage with a tap on it that you can turn on. you will still have to depend on the grid in some circumstances for the power. Sir, I implore the government to speak to the public about the use of the cisterns that we are forced to put in under our houses by law in the Town Planning Act. And dengue used to be a disease of the poor people in the country. It is no longer a disease of the poor people in the country. It is distinctly a disease of the middle class. And I speak without proof, but I rather suspect that the mosquitoes which are now present all year round are not flying in from Mars at night, that they're living in the tanks. So we need to educate the public about the use of the tanks, and we need to seriously get on with the business of having green plumbing, where you can flush your toilets and have your washing machine connected to the plumbing in your water storage tank from your roof. And we need, sir, and I'm not one who often calls for restriction, to seriously look at whether we need to ban, as we ban incandescent bulbs, ban high-volume cisterns for toilets. There was a time, sir, when one was able to buy in this country an incandescent bulb. It's now, I think, illegal to sell incandescent bulbs in this country. We should not be installing 5-liter cisterns or 10-liter cisterns in toilets anymore. We should reach the stage where you can have small volume cisterns that use small volumes of water each time you flush them. And we should also have the option of having a small flush and a big flush, because toilets consume large amounts of water. So water conservation, sir, is an important thing that we need to look at. Sir, I was a little bit concerned about the notion about gas storage. There's the requirement that commercial entities, in addition to having generators and portable water storage, have to have storage of gas. I wondered if that meant that your generator had to be a gas generator. It didn't, the announcement did not say that. And I believe it related to fuel. But certainly if one is connected to natural gas supply, why would you need gas storage? So if your generator is a natural gas generator and natural gas is piped to your area and you're connected, you don't need gas storage. Or do you mean gas as American gas? Do you mean gas or gasoline? Do you mean natural gas, LPG, or do you mean gasoline? Which gas do you mean? It didn't say fuel, it said gas. So I see a little bit of clarification of that. And now, sir, finally, I come to healthcare. I do not have a lot to say, because I'm sure my minister will be speaking. But I wish to comment on a bit of a carrot and a stick situation. The government, I wish to congratulate the government, sir. I wish to congratulate the government and the minister on finally, you want to hear again? I wish to congratulate the minister and the government on finally, sir, completing the matter of recapitalization of the QEH. It's been long, long overdue. In the former administration, an attempt was made to do such, and I'm glad to see that 15 years on, it has finally happened. So I congratulate the government. It will certainly help the people of the country. But I wish to comment, sir, on dental care in this country. It is atrocious. I can comfortably tell you that every day in this country, in my department, we admit to the QEH at least one person with a dental abscess. And the health of a nation is related to its teeth. It says that we're in a terrible, unhealthy situation. I have not admitted any of the big earners, and it's usually those who are less affluent. And it is because they have no recourse. There is no public emergency dental service. And the worst part of it is that we are now admitting children with dental abscesses. I am far closer to the end of my career and my specialty than I was at the beginning, after almost 40 years. I have never seen a child admitted with a dental abscess before. And what it says is that people just cannot afford to seek private dental care. And when the child does get a problem, so the preventive care is not in place, rotten teeth, caries, rotten teeth. So the preventive care is not in place, and when there's a problem, it gets bad enough that the child has to come into hospital. That is, sir, not good. So I urge the government to reactivate its dental program that it had. If you can find dentists who are willing to work in the public sector, I know that has been a problem, and I'm not about to bash the dentists on government's behalf, but I really should. But we need to find persons who will work in the public sector, provide dental care in the public sector, and help those who really need it. If you look at the amount of money that is spent every day in the hospital on treating patients with dental abscesses, if you put some of that money up front, I'm sure you can pay a dentist reasonable rates to provide the care. And it needs to be done. Sir, our hospital continues to be plagued with problems related to flow. It is constipated. The problems of flow were predictable and made worse by decisions to expand the A&E without fixing the problems of flow. And now, in addition to that, we unfortunately had a mantra that was repeated over and over by the executive: do not come here. And it continues to be said. Sir, you cannot have a tertiary care institution. Anybody should go on a radio and tell persons not to come to the hospital. It is at best idiotic. It is at best idiotic, because no patient in the middle of the night who wakes up with chest pain will be skilled enough to say, this is not a heart attack, if you're in the right age group and have the right predisposition. So to tell people not to come, and you tell them repeatedly, they will not come until they're at death's door. So we have to stop it. So I call upon the minister to immediately advise those in charge to stop doing it. Nowhere in the world will you go anywhere and hear an ad on the radio telling people, don't come to the hospital, unless it's been bombed or something. Nowhere. But we do it in Barbados routinely as part of the course. So I beg, sir, that my minister will advise them to stop it as of today. Now, sir, Sadly, the problems of the A&E department are directly related to the volume that it has to deal with and the seemingly inability to get processes completed efficiently. I really don't know what the solutions are. The length of time that it takes to process someone in our A&E is significantly longer than in the private emergency rooms. But the same doctors, my colleagues who work in such places, process them much faster in the private rooms. So I ask, is there glue on the floor in the A&E that people are stuck and they can't move? Why does it take so long? And it doesn't matter if you are a member of staff or anyone else. It's the same story. And we have a situation where some of the critical areas, the senior staff have abdicated responsibility to the juniors. And the leadership is not there. So I'm going to pick one and be unfair about it. I'll pick the Department of Radiology. Radiology. When a junior doctor issues me, a consultant, a report on a CT scan, I put it in the bin. Because if you're a junior doctor and you send me a report, you're in training, and you send me a report and you sign it, for me, it is useless. When I appear in the Supreme Court and the judge asks me, Dr. Mariner, you acted on this report because I'm being sued, but tell me what the qualification of this person who wrote this report. And I have to bite my tongue and pretend I can't hear the judge. There's something fundamentally wrong with the administrative policies that cannot fix the issues of staffing and having senior staff do what they're required to do. So I once again ask my colleague, the minister, to take the necessary action to fix some of these problems. I know he is trying, but he's having a hard time of it. Maybe, sir, he needs some help from another quarter. Sir, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Mr. Leonard. Senator Cummins.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I want to take the opportunity to thank all honorable members who have spoken. I want to begin with Senator Walters, who delivered the reply on behalf of the opposition of Barbados. And I want to also express appreciation to the independent members who spoke thereafter and to the members of the government. I want to take the time, Mr. President, in my wrap-up, just to make a document of the House. This is a document of the House, Mr. President, and it really is in response to quite a bit of conversation that has evolved in the public domain, and it was raised yesterday in the contribution from Senator Lindell Nurse. It was raised again by Senator Andrea Worrell this morning. I want to make a document of the House the record of public accounts meetings that have been held in this Parliament between 2018 and now. The issues that were addressed during that period as a consequence, Mr. President, of late reports, either annual reports or special reports of the Auditor General. Between 2018 and 2023, the first session of this Parliament, Mr. President, the first PAC meeting was held on February 1, 2019, second meeting the 9th of September 2019, the next meeting the 23rd of September 2019, Transport Board and the School Meal Center at 6 Roads. Between, Mr. President, November and September of 2020, the special report of the Transport Board was considered by the Public Accounts Committee. Mr. President, in 2018 and 2023, the second session of the PAC, the first 3 meetings up until August 2021 continue to look at the Transport Board report. From August 2021 to November 2021, Mr. President, the election was called in January of 2022. The Public Accounts Committee dealt with the special audits of the Urban Development Commission, which specifically looked at the Special Poverty Eradication Fund and the Barbados Water Authority. The last meeting of the last session before the election of January 2022, which was scheduled for 19th of November 2021, was cancelled. All of those meetings between 2018 and 2021, Mr. President, were chaired by the then, as he was known, Honorable Joseph Atherley in his capacity as leader of the opposition. The members of the committee constituted the existing members of the other place, the existing members on the government side of this place. In 2022, Mr. President, the first session of this government post the election, the first meeting of the PAC was held on June 3rd, 2024. It was an in-camera meeting and it was not broadcast. The second meeting, Mr. President, of the PAC was held on June 24th, 2024. It was an in-camera meeting. It was not publicly broadcast. The third meeting and the final meeting was held on Monday, the 8th of July, 2024. It was an in-camera meeting. It was not broadcast, and all members of the government side were present. On the first meeting that was held on June 3rd, the then member representing the opposition present was the then Senator Tricia Watson. On the second meeting that was there, the current member of the opposition side, Senator Ryan Walters, was present, and the third meeting, Senator Ryan Walters was present. That was the record of the meeting. In that meeting, Mr. President, there was and there is a record held in Hansard. That record, which can be procured from the government, from the Parliament site, from the Parliament of Barbados, will show that the government of Barbados, the government side of the members sitting on the PAC, agreed and felt that the matters which were captured in all of these meetings that I have spoken about ought to be completed, including those for which witnesses had been called, in particular the Transport Board matter and the Barbados Water Authority matter. Those investigations needed to be completed. There was one report that had already been completed, for which the report simply needed to be written up and submitted by the chairman. The chairman, as I've said before, is the leader of the opposition. Mr. President, the members of the government side in those meetings voiced no objection to the inclusion of any reports to be laid in Parliament and to be considered by the PAC. There was no objection. The position of the government then, as it has remained over time, has been we finish what is started. The government is a continuum. There were items on the PAC agenda that we felt needed to be completed, and in fact, the opposition's own member at the time, as she was then Senator Watson, agreed that it was important to finish work that had been started, and she said so in the committee. It is captured in the records of the meeting. The government then went on, Mr. President, to make the point that the matter which has been referred to in the public domain, which is the Hope report, was not then, on the first occasion of our meeting on June 3rd, 2024, as it is not now laid before this Parliament and therefore cannot be considered by the PAC. The government was very clear as well in those meetings that we had no objection once the report was laid that it would be considered by the PAC as a properly laid and presented document of this chamber. It is incorrect. It is misleading and bordering on something perhaps even more problematic to suggest that this government has at any time objected to the functioning of the PAC. In fact, Mr. President, the record will also show that under the previous government, when the leader of the opposition, now the Prime Minister of Barbados, chaired the then PAC, not only between 2015 and 2016 did the former Democratic Labour Party government seek to abolish the PAC, but they would not appear before meetings of the PAC. That is not what has been done by this government. In fact, I can say without question that the Prime Minister has ensured that on every occasion that there is a meeting called by this Parliament on any matter, the government side takes its business seriously and is present at all times. Anyone who is watching this Senate will see, and they call me Principal Cummins for a reason, they will see that when the cameras come on, the government side is in their seats at all times. We have been here in our seats at all times also for PAC. And I want to correct and lay as a document of this House the sequence of meetings of the PAC, and to make it known that since the 8th of July 2024, no meetings have been called by the PAC, by the chairman of the PAC, and the government of Barbados. This Barbados Labour Party government cannot be accused of frustrating the work of a committee that it does not call meetings for. Cannot be. I wanted to use the time also as I close today's debate on the appropriation bill to speak not specifically about the details of the bill itself, but I want to make a point, Mr. President, coming out of this PAC document that I have just laid. We are clear that not every Barbadian understands the workings of standing orders, and when we stand to suspend standing orders and to refer to the rules of the House and to refer to legislation and the work of the various arms of government, not every Barbadian understands that, and we accept that. But it is not a moment to take advantage of the public of Barbados to engage in scaremongering, fear-mongering, misinformation, lack of information, or twisted information. That is not the Barbados that we want to have any part of. Instead, what we want to be able to do, as a consequence of these estimates of expenditure, the investments in education, are to ensure we build a strong nation. You have heard from Senator Blackman, the new minister with responsibility for education transformation, that there is to be an investment in our people. An investment, Senator Blackman, also needs to be done in civic education for our people as well, so they understand when people are trying to mama-guide them. We heard from our new minister with responsibility for MIST. He has spoken about empowering our youth, getting them into a place where they can lead, and they will lead with integrity, Mr. President. We support that. And Senator Gregory Nichols, my schoolmate and comrade. No, not her comrade, St. Michael's School. I don't know why he keeps forgetting that part. Senator Gregory Nichols, Mr. President, gave a stellar history lesson in here today, Mr. President. He took us through the history of the Barbados Labour Party, the Democratic Labour Party, and he has ended in a way, Mr. President, that was where I started but could not have done in the detail that he has done, Mr. President. And so I want to thank him because he has saved me having to wrap up in the kinds of detail because he has already done it. And so I want to thank him for his contribution. Mr. President, as I close, as I beg to suspend this session in a few moments and to beg that this bill be read a second time in a minute, I want, Mr. President, to also thank the honorable senators who have been here over the course of the last few days, delving into the weeds and the details of the 2025 to 2026 estimates of expenditure, looking back historically at what has been spent by governments, and to be able to share with the people of Barbados the balance between a government rescuing a country in the first instance, while simultaneously navigating crises domestically and internationally, and still at the same time making a commitment to people, to communities, to youth, to education, to health, Mr. President. That is who the Barbados Labour Party has been. It is captured in these estimates. It is captured in the budgetary statement that has been delivered by the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, and it is captured in the philosophy of this Barbados Labour Party. And with these very few words, Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill is read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. For those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, the bill has been certified a money bill.
Yes, I hereby certify the money bill, and we therefore will not be going into the committee stage. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, it's been a long morning. I beg to move that we break for lunch and resume at 2:15 p.m. No, 3:15 p.m., I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mr. President. It's been a long day. I beg to move that the bill be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Will those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Appropriations Act of 2025.
The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Appropriations Act 2025. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited.
Mr. President, I beg to move that we suspend this sitting for lunch until 3:15 p.m.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 3:15 p.m. today. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This sitting is suspended until 3:15 p.m. today.